Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Godlike Naruto time travels to meet Minato part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Let's set the point straight beforehand. It's not like he wanted to go, really. In fact, all things considered, he was relatively happy where he was. So, alright, maybe it irked him that at 15, he was still a genin and the only one among his friends, excluding Sasuke. But that fact could have easily been dealt with by taking the next Chunin exam. It's not like anyone expected Naruto Uzumaki to fail, considering he was one of Konoha's strongest ninjas. He did, after all, train with the legendary Sannin Jiraiya, and most importantly, managed the impossible, brought Sasuke back home. Half a year earlier, right after Sasuke killed Danzu, Sakura and Kakashi-sensei had rushed in to apprehend the Uchiha. Both of them failed. After watching Sakura stop her sneak attack a mere hair's breadth away from beheading Sasuke, Naruto knew he also wouldn't be able to fulfill this farce of a mission. Sasuke was his teammate, his best friend, his brother. Like Sakura, he could never stomach the thought of slaying Sasuke. So, instead, he brushed aside the Hokage's orders and commenced his original plan of dragging Sasuke home. After bashing in Sasuke's head a couple times, the Uzumaki finally did his magic and convinced the broody boy that his vengeance had been achieved. Both Itachi and Danzo were already 6 feet under. They roared and raged at each other, Chidori and Rasengan colliding, because that was how true men talked. Then, Naruto almost lost hope as Sasuke turned calmly away from Team 7 in favor of his former allies. But he'd been wrong to doubt Sasuke and himself. The blonde fox container's smile returned to Sasuke's unexpected betrayal towards Zetsu, right after he called Madara out. Madara was a slippery bastard. With the combined efforts of Naruto in Sage Mode, Sasuke with Sakura behind him healing wounds and sending him chakra, and Kakashi with the Mangekyo Sharingan out, they just barely managed to do some harm to the immortal Uchiha. He disappeared into his space-time jutsu, irritated and fuming mad at the damage done and Sasuke's deceit. That was the last time they saw Madara Uchiha, or at least for the time being. Near death, and limbs giving out, the search team slowly made their way back to Konoha with Sasuke and Karin in tow. With Danzo was out of commission, Kakashi was quickly promoted to apparent Hokage. His first task was to reappoint Sasuke as a Leaf Nin only after stripping him of his privileges, of course. There was willfulness and there was stupidity, and Kakashi was far from stupid. He had faith in his former student, but not unconditional trust, because though he liked to think the best of these precious students of his, they were still shinobi, forged from blood and death. Still, for a defector, Sasuke wasn't treated too horribly. There were only a few rules he'd set on the team. No longer was Sasuke allowed to carry any other weapon other than standard kunai in the village. He was watched 24/7, and could be immobilized at any time he seemed to be a harm. Neither was training was not allowed unless supervised. Naruto's immense trust was the only reason why the teen wasn't treated any worse. The villagers, for the most part, listened to their temporary Hokage. When Tsunade-sama awoke from her coma and retook the position, they grudgingly accepted Sasuke back. This was only after Naruto whined at her for days to trust Sasuke herself. The village of Konoha treated Sasuke with as much scorn as they had once given Naruto, if not more. Who could blame them after Sasuke's attempt at their lives? The girls no longer swooned after him, and Sasuke, although accepted, was left to his lonesome self. As for Sakura, although she occasionally visited Sasuke, she spent most of her days in the Konoha General Hospital as a medic nin. Her skills quickly improved under proper tutelage, until she was relied on as much as Tsunade herself. Never one to disappoint her growing reputation, she dedicated all her time to her skill, to the point where she was practically living in the hospital as her second home. And the girl, Karin, not much could be said about her. She died before they could save her, still calling out for Sasuke. But really, life wasn't so bad, with the war seemingly on a halt. The village was prospering again, and Konoha was almost back to its former glory. Yes, everything was going great. So why did he decide to listen to Kakashi of all people? The day started out fine as Naruto routinely called Sasuke out for a quick spar. As usual, it ended with an Anbu showing up to tell them they were causing too much ruckus. He dallied around the village after that, before heading to check on Irika Sinai and his current academy class, trying to corrupt his students. He was chased away by an angry Irika, grin stretch on his prankster face, as Konohamaru and his pals held the Chunin back. Good assist. With nothing more interesting to do, he visited Sakura next, of course, interrupting her checkups and making her still-growing list of patients wait hours more. The pink-haired girl was forced to shoo Naruto away before he could do any more damage, hands dangerously twitching into the form of boulder-breaking fists. Even Naruto knew better than to test his luck to that, so lunch it was then. There was no better place than Ichiraku. If Naruto knew the insanity of trouble that he would soon be shoved headfirst into courtesy of Kakashi, he would have skipped out on his favorite ramen that day, because no amount of good ramen was worth it. It was a shame he didn't though. As Naruto merrily made his way to the ramen bar, Kakashi intercepted him with a "Yo, joining me for lunch, Kakashi-sensei?" The blonde asked, not even batting an eyelash at his sudden appearance. He was used to Kakashi showing up whenever and wherever he wanted. Maybe later, the silver-haired man said, patting the teen on the head. I was just wondering how much you knew about seals. He stopped mid-stride at the word. Fuinjutsu? Naruto confirmed, I studied a bit on it with Jiraiya, and then after on my own when I found out the fourth was my dad. The boy grinned sheepishly, and muttered something about living up to his dad's legacy in an embarrassed tone. The Jounin nodded, knowing full well of this. At the moment, you are the most qualified seal specialist in this village. Perhaps that's not saying much, but you've studied it more intensively than anyone else present. What is your current level? Naruto let out a long ah before shrugging. I know a fair amount. I'm sure I could recognize seals, if that's what you want me to do. Plus with a bit more studying, I could totally make my own. He added enthusiastically. So what's this about? Instead of an answer, the Jounin's eye just creased up into a smile. That works, Kakashi replied with a satisfied nod. If you're curious, come along, he said cheerfully, turning around in spot. Naruto watched him warily. Coming? Kakashi urged, with a tilt of his head towards the village gates, as Naruto stood unmoving behind him. Naruto blinked blankly. Now? At Kakashi nod, he groaned out loud with a sulk on his lips. What about my ramen? I was going to Ichiraku's for lunch. He whined. Kakashi hummed and beamed back in response, a chilling chuckle echoing from the back of his throat. Naruto hid a shudder from his teacher's smirking expression. Ma, I think you can skip out on lunch once in a while, Naruto. Don't you want to look good for the ladies? He said casually, strutting down the road. Naruto froze. Are you calling me fat? He demanded, as Kakashi continued on his way, seemingly oblivious to his cries. I train it off, I swear. Sensei? Hey, Kakashi-sensei, are you listening to me? The man turned his head. Ma, if you say you do, Kakashi agreed aloofly. He waved a hand, gesturing at the gates once more. How about this, Naruto? If you do a good job, I'll treat you to the ramen you missed, he negotiated half-heartedly, because it didn't take a genius to guess the blonde's response. All right. With a whoop, Naruto's steps turned to leaps as he dragged his teacher out the village gates. A rock, Naruto deadpanned. I skipped lunch and ran all that way so you could show me a rock. It's a very special rock, Kakashi corrected. Somewhere between Leaf and Cloud Country, the silver-haired Jounin stumbled among this very rock while he was making his way back home post-mission. Naruto lifted an unamused eye at his teacher. What's so special about it? Ah, that's a good question, Kakashi said airily, but didn't elaborate. The blonde stared incredulously at him. You mean you don't know? So we really did just come here to stare at a stupid rock? Kakashi scared at the boy. I didn't say that. The stupid rock was about a meter high, eroded through weather and environment until it was shaped to something akin to an inverted pyramid. It sat deep in the forest on an uneven terrain of rocks and upheaved dirt. Trees surrounded the place densely like needles on a porcupine. If it weren't for Kakashi pointing out that particular boulder, Naruto would have dismissed it for being the boring rock he sorely believed it was. So? Naruto urged, when Kakashi was only being a pain, grinning mysteriously at his confusion. Kakashi stepped forward and touched the large boulder. All right, teasing aside, the man finally said, kneeling down beside it, just watch. He channeled chakra out of his hand. The moment it reached the rock, the floor lit up in a pale red color. It looks to me like those are seals on the floor. I landed on the rock on my way back, and it absorbed chakra through my feet. Naruto dropped down, studying the seals. I can't see them very clearly. It's too light. Kakashi poured in more chakra, and the seals lit up brighter, expanding further around them. Naruto looked cautiously over at his teacher before turning back to the seals. It's not going to activate on us, is it? He asked with due paranoia. Kakashi shook his head. I experimented on it before I reported back, and it hadn't changed within that period of time. The results were the same if I continuously poured in chakra, or if I fed it and bit by bit the seals would light up before slowly fading away. I've tried translating the seals, but I haven't actively studied Fuinjutsu, and this is out of my league. Naruto let out an interested huh, before turning back down to the ground. He spoke and he worked. You know, sensei, studying something potentially dangerous sounds like something I would do. Aren't you usually the voice of reason against this stuff? I believe that's Sakura nowadays, Kakashi joked lightly, before giving the boy a guilty grin. I do admit, this intrigues me. I've yet to see a seal this intricate before. Kakashi studied the curving lines, face growing serious. And with Madara liable to return any day now, I think it's best if we figured out what this does before he finds it, and uses it to his advantage. The man has more experience and knowledge than any of us. If anyone could make use of this in a heartbeat, it would be him. That, perhaps, was the merits of being an immortal. His accumulative wisdom exceeded that of average shinobi. Right, Naruto said suddenly, motivation renewed. I'll do my best too. He clambered beside Kakashi and dropped to the man's side to press his palm by his sensei's. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. Naruto shrugged in response. You're too slow. I can't see anything. We'll take all month at this pace and by then Madara would probably be back. Everyone's depending on us. If you want to light up the whole thing, it'll take more chakra than I want to spare without winding myself, Kakashi answered honestly. Naruto shrugged at that. That's why you've got me. The blonde focused on his hand on the stone, calling up the Kyuubi's power. Are you sure it's safe, sensei? Naruto added suddenly, unable to help the bout of doubt that cropped up at that moment. Kakashi mused over the question for all of a minute before answering reasonably. If worse comes to worse, I've told Tsunade-sama about my plans for today, and she'll dispatch someone to look for us if we don't return. Otherwise, the Kyuubi won't let anything happen to you, and I have enough experience to tackle most worst-case scenarios. What's the worst that can happen? And then they both forced their chakra into the rock. The pale red slowly shone brighter, until it was as red as blood, lighting up the mossy, leaf-littered grounds. Between the cracks that were the dead leaves, strokes of patterns could be seen, weaving in and out in complicated scrawls. It ran far down the forest until it was out of their sight, only faintly visible from their vantage point by the glow it reflected off the tree trunks. Naruto watched it expand, eyes widening as he saw it continue further and further on. Kakashi finally looked a little worried. If you can, cut off your chakra, the man ordered abruptly. Now, yeah, Naruto began, but then the wind suddenly picked up. It grew violent, hurling whichever way it pleased. It whipped and slashed brutally at their skins, threatening to leave red marks the next day. I'm stopping! The blonde yelled over the howling wind, hair flapping messily around his face. He tried to let go, but his hands stayed firmly attached. His chakra involuntarily spilled into the rock, as it sucked it in greedy. It's stealing my chakra! I can't let go! A glance at Kakashi showed that the man felt the same as he did. His masked head drooped as the man quickly lost all his energy, and his wincing eye conveyed more emotion than the trained shinobi would ever purposely allow. Sorry, Naruto, the man hissed out, before he dropped. His body collapsed into a boneless slouch, yet despite so, his hand was still firmly attached in place. Kakashi! Naruto screamed. He tried to thrash around, but his body stood still. His mind had no control over his actions. Damn it, let Met go! His attempt to blast himself out with chakra, but it failed as the rock merely absorbed it all in. I'm not dying here, I'm not! He cried determinedly. If pulling out wasn't possible, then he'd do the opposite, damn it! He charged his chakra at it, hoping for it to overload the rock, for it to involuntarily self-destruct. If there was one thing Naruto was confident of, it was his chakra reserves. Even so, he felt winded as his chakra was pulled out faster than anticipated. Still, for a moment Naruto was optimistic it would be fine in the end, and then, it turned red. Like toxin, raw Kyuubi chakra flowed out, stinging his coils as it coursed through his system. He'd used the red chakra before, but never this amount, never this quickly. His heart rate accelerated, his stomach dropped, and he wasn't able to stifle a scream as he felt like his soul was being ripped out through his throat. His blue eyes bled bloodshot in pain, before he drooped, falling much like Kakashi had done not moments ago. Naruto tried to stay awake, but it was a futile attempt. You owe me so much ramen for this, Kakashi, he murmured out moodily, before blackness finally swallowed him up whole. There was a flash of red light, lightening the villagers close by thought, and the two unconscious bodies disappeared from sight. There left no sign of a seal anywhere, and no residue chakra lingered to be traced. In short, there was nothing there to indicate anything happened in the forest. All was left was a meter-tall rock sitting innocently on the rocky terrain, looking as suspicious as the presence trees in a forest. The ground on his face was not a pleasant sensation. Or maybe it was the mud he was lying in. That's the last time I ever listened to you, a muffled voice to his right groaned out, spitting out dirt every other word. I think I ate enough sand to fill Gaara's gourd. Silence greeted his words. Kakashi-sensei? The voice asked hesitantly. Kakashi didn't bother to move from his position he was laid in, face down on the ground. Yes, Naruto, he said dismissively, categorizing his functioning limbs and current status. His head was pounding, and the ground was oddly tilting. He had barely enough chakra to sense if there was any immediate danger around them. No, scratch that. He was seriously chakra exhausted and couldn't sense a thing. There was shuffling and sounds of clothes crinkling as the boy beside him suddenly sat up. This is your fault, sensei. Argh, my head. Naruto moaned just as abruptly, clutching his head in his two hands as vertigo hit him. What happened? The Jounin ignored his student's words, unable to answer something he himself had no idea of either. The only thing he could suggest was perhaps they had activated a reverse summoning seal, but he'd certainly never seen one that big or complicated before. Naruto also had dabbled with reverse summoning, Kakashi knew, so if the blonde hadn't mentioned it while they were lighting up the odd rock, then that likely hadn't been it. What else could it be though? Sensei! Naruto whined. He gave his teacher a shove with his legs in annoyance, turning the man over. Fresh air, and he didn't even need to move. Naruto, don't abuse your teacher. Kakashi breathed out, mind still revolving around the mystery what was the rock. Whatever, Naruto huffed. Then his brows furrowed, caught on the view around the two of them. Hey, wait a minute. This isn't where we were before the teen started, trailing off in confusion. Sky. Sunday clouds? Kakashi whirled as he took in the sights from his position on the ground. This was precisely why he'd considered they'd been reverse summoned, and yet, Who would set the summon point in the middle of nowhere? The tall trees that had surrounded them and enclosed around the rock was replaced with a nondescript trail. And how far from fire country were they if he muddy and it hadn't rained in weeks? Where's that stupid rock? Naruto demanded, pulling himself up to his knees to stand. Damn it, sensei. I knew we shouldn't have touched that thing. Where are we now? He took a wobbly step forward. I'm going to look around. The copy mean stopped him with a hiss. Naruto, I don't know about you, but I have no chakra to spare. We cannot afford to run blindly into danger in this state. The teen halted, sliding back on the floor, muscles thanking him every second. I know, but we can't just sit here and wait. The blonde argued. We don't even know where here is. Besides, the QB helps me regenerate chakra faster than you. Not fast enough, Kakashi rebutted. But Naruto's complaint was interrupted by the vibrations of footsteps. Naruto, the Jounin said warningly. The blonde nodded, also hearing the approaching travelers and understanding his teacher's unspoken words of stay alert. Should we hide? Kakashi shook his head. If they're ninjas, they'll sense us regardless. Besides, I doubt either of us can move out of the way fast enough to evade detection. Let's just hope they're friendly traveling merchants. Thought the chances of that were slim, outweighed by thieves, bandits, and fellow shinobi. Now what? Naruto asked. His teacher shrugged. There really was only one thing they could do at this point beside hope. Play dead. It had been 3 years since the blonde had been assigned his team. They'd done all sorts of missions ranking from D rank to B rank. Heck, a couple A ranks even managed to sneak their way in. He thought he'd seen almost every scenario possible in life, yet none of that prepared him for his little raven-haired Chunin's comment of hey, there are 2 dead people lying in the middle of the road. Alright, dead people lying around weren't a big deal. He'd seen plenty of those. But in an area clearly undisturbed with no residue chakra floating around, and no signs of a recent battle, how did 2 chakra-depleted ninjas come to be? A biting voice broke his train of thought. They're not dead, idiot, there's still a faint pulse of chakra in them. I knew that. The other boy yelled indignantly. He ran up the first man in front of him, coated in layers of mud, and promptly shook the man's shoulders in a vigorous motion. The only reason why Minato allowed it was because he deemed the stranger no threat to his kids. Wake up! He cried, what are you doing in the middle of the road? On the ground, Kakashi held quiet as the oddly familiar voice continued screaming in his ear. Now where had he heard this annoying voice before? Footsteps grew louder as the other members of the group came closer to the loud brat beside him. Geez, the little miscreant continued, how can you even breathe under that mud-caked mask? Don't worry, I'll take it off for you. The kid's fingers inched towards the cloth covering his face. Before he could even touch it, Kakashi's hand snapped up and grabbed him by the wrists. His lone visible eye opened and creased into a smile as he gave the boy his greeting. Yo, he said airily, as though he hadn't been playing dead just mere minutes ago. His smile didn't quite reach his lips, but no one could see it under the mask anyways. It was the best he could do considering just who was standing in front of him. Do you mind unhanding my student? A voice asked from behind. His tone was light, almost playful, but Kakashi could hear the threat woven underneath it. Kakashi's throat caught at the voice. He turned his head around, winced as the looming figure shifted, sun blinding him. He blinked the spots out of his eyes to be greeted with the sight of sunshine blonde hair. Beneath it, clear, sky-blue eyes narrowed down on him. I apologize, he murmured, voice miles away. The raven-haired teen rubbed his wrist when Kakashi let go, stepping back towards his teacher. Smooth, Obito, a voice drawled from further away. At least I woke him up, Kakashi, the first retorted back. Their bickering confirmed the suspicions of the Jounin on the ground. But how this odd phenomenon was happening was a different story altogether. The man, most likely Minato, his old, deceased sensei, squatted beside him, giving Kakashi a hand to help him up. Who might you be? And what happened here? Minato asked. Kakashi's blatant lack of chakra clearly gave no threat to the blonde. I don't. Kakashi suddenly remembered Naruto, who was still lying motionless, uncertain if he was allowed to interrupt. Nah, he cut off again. Perhaps it wasn't such a good idea to call the boy Naruto in front of his dad. He didn't know if it was possible something so simple could change the future. But what if Minato refused to name his son Naruto because of something like this? What if a lot of things, actually, but nothing that was any good? Nah, wake up, he prodded his student beside him. Naruto groaned and pretended to just awaken with an exaggerated roll of his head. What happened? The boy's eyes opened, and then widened as he was greeted with the sight of the fourth Hokage. He froze and paled, eyes immediately darting away. Naruto had heard the childish voices a while ago yelling the names Kakashi and Obito, but it didn't click why it sounded so familiar until just now. They were names of Kakashi's old team. And their teacher was the fourth. His dad, the fourth, or rather the Jounin, seeing as he was yet to be appointed that position, misunderstood the boy's ashen face. Don't worry, we won't harm you. I just want to know what happened to you two, he placated. I don't know, Naruto said hesitantly, unsure of what he could say. He glanced at his teacher for guidance, but said man was too busy staring at his no longer dead teammates to even notice his look. He gave Kakashi a kick. What happened? Kakashi painfully ripped his eyes off of Obito and Rin. What happened? That was a good question. The two of them didn't even know what truly occurred, let alone have time to come up with a cover story, not that they knew they needed one in the first place. But as like all professional shinobi, lies came second nature in tight situations. Brevity was the key to a plausible excuse. Let the other man fill in the gaps themselves, prompted by vague sounds of acknowledgement, so that they could give themselves a small room for denial if it should come to that. We were traveling, Kakashi began slowly, eyeing Naruto to cue him to play along. We were on our way to Konoha, when we came across something odd on the road. We approached it to get a better look, only to be jumped from behind. The next thing I remember, I'm afraid, is feeling weaker and weaker, before passing out. And then I open my eyes and see that boy there, Kakashi finished, pointing to Obito. Minato looked them over. Is that all? He asked, voice even as he held his judgment to himself. As far as I can remember, Kakashi agreed, while Naruto nodded fervently beside him. There was no evidence to prove the two were lying, but on the other hand, there was nothing to prove they weren't lying either. Their appearances matched the man's story. There were no cuts or bruises on them, indicating they'd indeed never been caught in a fight. If they'd been jumped, they certainly never fought back. Their lack of chakra, absorbed out, perhaps, agreed with the man's description of becoming drained until they collapsed. Minato weighed the consequences, before coming to a decision. He grabbed Kakashi, slinging the man's arm over his shoulders for support. Well, my team and I are heading to Konoha, he admitted, steadying the man's queasy legs. The two of you can come with us so a nurse can check you over. Naruto grinned as Obito and Rin ran over to help him up. Thanks, he said. No problem. I wouldn't like to leave you defenseless if anyone else runs across you too. Much later that day, when you wake up to the embrace of white walls and the smell of chemical disinfectants, hospital is your best bet. And yes, that's exactly where Kakashi found himself when he opened his eyes next. He gave a soft groan, rolling towards his side. To his left, Naruto sat on the adjacent bed, having awakened much earlier than his teacher had. The moment Kakashi moved, he leaped over to him. Finally, you're up, he cried in a low tone, trying not to let his voice project. Took you long enough. They've been trying to question me all day, but I didn't know what I could say. They, apparently, were in a private room in the Konoha General Hospital. Visitors were not allowed, and Anbu's hiding discreetly in every shadow of the room. The only person who Naruto had talked to so far was the Hokage. As if on cue, the hospital door opened, and the third Hokage strode in. Minato, the one who had found them, was closely behind. Excellent, you're awake now, the third said as soon as he walked in. Kakashi could help but stare at the man. He had watched the wrinkles grow on the old man's face as years passed under his leadership. He saw the old man fall by the hands of Orochimaru, unable to save him. He had been there for his funeral as the whole of Konoha cried at their loss. And now, here, in front of his eyes, was that dear old Sarutobi Hiruzen, in the flesh, and as healthy and young as ever. You look as though you've seen a ghost, the man commented offhandedly as Kakashi continued to stare. Your young friend here did the same thing, he added, motioning towards Naruto. We are shocked we have made it to Konoha, Hokage-sama, Kakashi said courteously. The third nodded thoughtfully. Was Konoha your final destination? I hear you only arrived here by the chance assistance of Minato and his team, he said, observing the two in front of him. After washing off layers and layers of dried mud from their skins, their appearance gave the Hokage quite a shock. The first one who awoken had blonde hair the exact shade as Minato's, and blue eyes only a hint of a shade darker. He could easily pass off as Minato's brother twin, even if he was older. As for the other man, Hiruzen had to perform a double take. For a second, the man had thought Minato managed to bring back the late Hatake Tsukumo from the beyond his grave. A second glance revealed all the slight differences. The man had a slimmer jawline, and more of a lithe figure than the Tsukumo they knew. It was a lucky coincidence, the Tsukumo lookalike replied. Is that so? Hiruzen said skeptically. He looked over at the silver-haired man, new mask in place of the old one that the nurse threw out due to the grime it accumulated when they found him. I don't believe we've caught your name? He prodded. Though it wasn't an official interrogation, Kakashi knew better than to brush off his question. Kakashi thought fast, shuffling through names similar enough to his own that he would be able to react naturally. Please, Hokage-sama, call me Kabushi. And that's he glanced over at Naruto for him choose his own alias. The blonde gave a jump. Oh, Narue? Naruto said, unable to finish without a lilt in his voice, making it sound suspiciously like a question. The silver-haired Jounin grimaced internally, but otherwise didn't react to give the teen away. The third looked as though he wanted to comment, but changed his mind, because it was a small matter. You look awfully similar to a certain clan we have here in Konoha, he stated calmly, much more interested in this than the possibility of a lied name. The Jounin forced a smile on his face, above the wincing pinch he felt at the mention of his father. Is that so? I must admit, that was why Narue and I were heading towards Konoha in the first place. I heard my brother lives here, and wanted to visit. Or at least I'm hoping you're talking about Hatake Tsukumo? Kakashi confirmed, because he hadn't missed the way the third left out the identity of the clan as a sly method to test his knowledge. Our parents split when we were young. I left with my mother, who hadn't wished for her loyalties to be tied down to any particular village or country. I'd been living the life as a traveler with Naruto as my companion. Kakashi, now dubbed Kabushi, looked at the old Hokage, who nodded wordlessly at his explanation. Kakashi knew his father, Tsukumo, was never one to talk about family, especially after Kakashi's mother died. In fact, he went as far as avoiding anything that had to do with family, little Kakashi included. The man always gave him empty promises, and left for missions as soon as he got back. His childhood was anything but welcoming. Tsukumo never mentioned any relatives, but I cannot ignore the similarities of your appearances. Hiruzen looked as though he would have liked to light up his pipe, to puff away as he pondered through the incomplete puzzle laid by the two, but the hospital banned smoking on the premises. And your friend there? He asked, hand waving over at Naruto. He wouldn't speak until you were awake. This was slightly trickier. Kids are paranoid of the littlest things. He was probably afraid you were enemies, and would kill one of us after he gave up information. He waved his hand lazily, uttering his excuses so nonchalantly that were they anyone else, the lie could have been overlooked. But both Minato and the Hokage's eyes narrowed. And what kind of enemies would you have? The blonde jounin asked suspiciously. And while I'm at it, care to explain the Konoha Hittite you both were found with? You can never be careless, Kabushi said honestly, not quite answering the question. We were jumped by unknown men only earlier, and I've always taught him to be safe than sorry. When uncertain, it is always wise to view all in suspicion. He then hit a pause with a breath, uncertain how to breach the headband issue. They're mine. Naruto chimed in quickly, contributing at last. He'd been mulling over his excuses for a while Kakashi had taken over the brunt of the conversation. The Hokage looked over at the young blonde, an eyebrow rose to urge the boy on. Oh? He said. Naruto nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, the boy swung his feet where he had them dangling off the hospital bed, the action making him seem younger than ever. I found a Konoha Hittite stashed away in my stuff a long time ago. I think it might have been one of my parents. I don't really remember either of them, but I've treasured the headband since then because it could be theirs. Naruto wriggled in spot as his mind churned, transitioning to the next part of his story. So I took up wandering around since I was alone and there was nothing else to do, and then I met Kabushi-sensei. He taught me practically all I know. Kabushi, he actually found his Hittite on a dead guy. I told him to take it cause I thought it might make getting into Konoha easier if we somehow showed we had something connected to it. My fault, really. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Hiruzen spoke. And just what village were you from? Naruto shrugged, scratching his hair, likely hadn't thought ahead this much. Don't know, he said before vaguely waving his hand in a random direction. There were trees around, and birds, and this ugly rock. He glared at Kakashi, who didn't bother to react, and we lived in a little hut with nothing but cold water, and I was always alone. Naruto hummed thoughtfully before cocking his head over at his interrogators. How do I know if I was in a village? He asked curiously, turning the question back on them. Were there guards that stopped you from leaving as you left? Minato inquired, to which Naruto shook his head. We're travelers, Kakashi repeated, a small futile hope that he wouldn't need to elaborate. It was unfulfilled. But now that you're both rested up, it is apparent your chakra levels are beyond that of mere civilians. You both have clearly been trained, but where were you taught? The old Hokage pressed. This boy claims he learned from you, but where did you learn it, Hatake? My mother, Kakashi answered immediately, falling onto the imaginary mother who could be anything he wanted her to be, really. My mother knew some techniques, and continued to pick up bits and pieces from people around the different countries. I continued traveling after her death, and later picked up the orphaned kid, he said, jerking his head over at Naruto. Kakashi gave a sigh, one of heartache and toilsome determination. I'd always known my father and brother lived in Konoha, and after learning Naruto's family may have ties to the village as well, we decided to head over. Traveling is a passion, it is a lonely pursuit sometimes, and I do miss my family. I'd never thought about it during my travels with my mother, but after adopting Naruto, he's taught me to cherish what little relations I have left. Kakashi let the truths in his words mingle with his lies. You should always cherish your precious people. Naruto nodded solemnly from the side, eyes cast downwards, remembering his own life and the friends, who were really as close to family as he'd ever gotten. He'd failed or almost failed. The third Hokage's face sobered at their expressions, because the sincerity of their statements hit deep, though he didn't show it. Though he'd had to make hard decisions as Hokage, he'd always considered the village his family, and more so at the thought of his wife and son. Hiruzen shook his head regretfully. I'm afraid Hatake Tsukumo's no longer with us, the man said softly, nevertheless with a careful eye watching the other man's reaction. It has been 7 years ago since Konoha has felt the loss of him. I see, Kakashi said calmly, voice unnaturally tight. Seeing his younger self standing by Obshio and Rin, perhaps 12 or 13, Kakashi logically knew his father was no longer a part of the world. Yet, somewhere in his mind he hoped he was wrong. He hoped the selfish, childish notion that perhaps Tsukumo would still be here, and that this was a sort or parallel universe where everything that went wrong in his life hadn't happened to this Kakashi. But no, life was not that gracious to him. Kakashi grieved for his old man once more. He had a son, however. Hatake Kakashi, the old man continued, offering the information, perhaps, because he approved of the older Hatake's genuine response. He is the sole member of the Hatake clan in Konoha. The silver-haired Jounin closed his eyes, willing the sudden bombardment of memories to disperse. He remembered the pain, the sorrow, the pity, the hate. He remembered how callous he was by this point in time, a heartless robot, a tool with nothing to live for, eroded by bitterness. He remembered how that cost him everything. He pushed everything away, and everything left. For years after, he was nothing more than an empty shell. Kakashi didn't want to push his luck, but the topic was a perfect segue into his next point of action. He lowered his head in a sign of submission, voice carrying the jagged beat of hesitance. I admit, Naruto and I had only planned on a brief visit to Konoha, but hearing this I must implore you, Hokage-sama, please allow us to stay. The old man's eyes bore on him, and Kakashi struggled to dredge up nothing but the feel of sincerity. I remember my own state when I lost my parent young, and it was not an ideal time for me. I wish to be there for my nephew. I am willing to become a citizen of Konoha for that. I pledge my loyalty as a shinobi to Konoha and Lord Hokage. Oh, Naruto spoke up from the adjacent bed. His eyes were shadowed, remembering his own childhood. It sucks, he said in a pained voice, when you're all alone, when no one understands. His thoughts wandered towards their old broody teammate. Friends are nice, but sometimes, nothing beats family. It's a connection that can't be replaced. I pledge as well. The chair Hiruzen was on creaked as he rose from his seat. I understand your requests, he said, voice betraying nothing. He turned towards the door. For now, please take your time to recuperate in the hospital. We shall speak again soon. With that, he left the room. Minato tracked the man, perhaps watching his Hokage's back, before finally following suit to exit the room. He gave the two patients a nod, discreetly lingering on the downtrodden form of Naruto, and then quickly left. As their footsteps descended down the hall, Naruto stared after his father's vacant spot. He spoke only 2 words, but the emotions behind it told the whole story. He's alive, Naruto whispered. Kakashi smiled softly, his own emotions barely kept under control. Yes, he is. They all are. Back at the Hokage's office, Hiruzen leaned back onto his chair, lighting up his pipe at the same time. Minato stood attentively in front of the desk as the old man stared out his tower window. What do you think about the two? The Hokage asked, sounding all the world casual. Minato raised his head, drawing his mind back on the travelers. Well, Minato started hesitantly, considering we are in the middle of a war, it is inconceivable to accept their words at face value. The chances of them being a spy is much too high to dismiss at this critical time in battle. But the man could hear the pause at the end of Minato's sentence. The Namikaze closed his eyes, Naruto's face behind his eyelids. The weary, sad tremor of their voices echoed in his mind. But maybe I'm too soft, but I don't think all of that was a lie. I could feel their emotions, their sadness when they were talking about being alone. And that Hatake Kabushi, he honestly wanted to help Kakashi. Minato's face hardened. But they're not giving us the whole truth. Not about their history. It's too vague, riding on excuses that are impossible to prove otherwise, yet impossible to prove truthful either. Minato glanced at the Hokage, who nodded at his words. The man seemed to have formed his own judgment in the time it took Minato to relay his opinion, but he didn't seem eager to share it. Instead, Hiruzen gestured at him. If you were Hokage, how would you go about handling this case, Minato? He asked. Minato's eyes widened. Me? Minato confirmed, bewildered at the command, but didn't question orders. He forced his mind back to work, critically re-reviewing the information, speaking out his process. Given his looks, Kabushi is a Hatake, but that doesn't say much for his loyalties. The other boy is completely unknown. The presence of the ongoing war cast them in a suspicious light. They could be spies, yet the fact I found them chakra exhausted in the middle of the road where anyone could get at them makes the matter questionable. If our route back to Konoha had been found out beforehand and they had been planted there deliberately, it's still too risky if they lost too much chakra, or if bandits or other shinobi got to them first, they could have easily died, unless they were expendable, but it's unlikely considering they especially recruited a Hatake, a known loyal Konoha clan, to lower our guard. He mulled over their stories. By saying they're travelers, they're tying themselves to no nation. Yet, they both have Konoha Hittite, showing that they want to be in ours stolen or not. Or maybe they even killed the men themselves to get the protector? Yet, wouldn't that only make us suspicious of them? Why do it? He ran an agitated hand through his hair. They've offered themselves to Konoha. But is that only to get closer to our shinobi? The man spent minutes more running ideas through his mind. Well? The third pressed. Minato cleared his throat. As a Hokage, I would accept them. Especially with the war so close, we will need all the manpower we can get. Although, I would keep Anbu assigned to keep an eye on them at all time. He rubbed his chin. As soon as possible, I would like to see where their strength is at so I know what to expect of them if they are a threat. Though it will be likely they suppress their true talent, at least we will have an idea of their abilities and reflexive reactions. As well, I would want to devise a way to test their loyalty. He glanced over at the old Hokage, who huffed wordlessly on his pipe. It was a long time before he nodded at him, just as the blonde's confidence was starting to wane. Minato let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, and gave the old man a pearly grin in relief, feeling as though he'd passed a test of sorts. His grin suddenly diminished. As a teacher, however, he started again, and Hiruzen looked over at him. As Kakashi's teacher, the blonde specified, I want them to stay so Kabushi can, if he can, help Kakashi recover. It's unhealthy, what that boy puts himself through, and Kabushi seems like he understands, at least from his story. And that other blonde, family? Hiruzen asked, cutting him off. The resemblance between the two blondes was really too uncanny to ignore. Minato rubbed his face. Well, I don't think so. I've never heard of a Naue, though my knowledge of family history leaves much to be desired, and there's no members in Konoha left to ask. I just think he's a straightforward kid and that we can trust him. It's honestly more of a gut feeling, really, he confided sheepishly. The old man's eyes softened. Maybe I've become too soft as well, my boy. At the blonde's glance, Hiruzen nodded. We'll let them stay. Minato, since your team discovered the two, I want you to keep your eyes on them during the day. I'll arrange a time for them to show their skills and determine their ranks. Kabushi, I think he would want to stay with his nephew. Knowing Kakashi, the boy will be suspicious enough to know to stay alert. As for Naue, I'll take him, the Namikaze said before he realized he'd spoken out loud. Ah? You will, Minato? The man blushed lightly. When we were talking about family connections, I felt something, and I hoped, maybe he was related to you. The old man finished for him. At his agreement, the third continued, don't let that get in the way of your judgment of them. For all we know, they're spies with exceptional acting, and the pair of them were picked out for this mission solely for that reason. Yes, sir, Minato acknowledged. He knew that might be the case, but he could hope, couldn't he? Excellent. I will send an Anbu to inform the two when the nurses deem them fit to be discharged. Minato nodded and left at that, hearing the unofficial dismissal. Days later, sensei, what are they like? A raven-haired boy hounded his teacher, the topic a constant since the day they picked the two unknown travelers up. His enthusiasm was only renewed when Minato told his team they would be joining them soon. Obito had tried to sneak into the hospital to get a glimpse of the two earlier, but cursed the nurses. They banned all entry into their room. Currently, Team 7 was in their usual training area, waiting for the two visitors to arrive. I don't see why one of them has to stay with me, sensei, Kakashi bit out, ignoring Obito's chattering. He couldn't for the life of him figure out what went through his teacher's mind. Two unknown ninjas allowed to stay in Konoha, alright, fine, that was the Hokage's decision. One unknown ninja staying with him, in his apartment, no. Minato wouldn't even tell him who they were. Obito stopped jumping in eager anticipation, settling back into gravity with a sour look pursed on his lips. What? Hey, why does the bastard get to live with one of them? I found them, take him. Kakashi, Minato reprimanded, he's staying with you. Why him? Obito whined, because it wasn't fair the bastard got everything handed to him, especially when he didn't know how to appreciate what he had. Kakashi doesn't even want him. The silver-haired Chunin glowered at his teacher, ignoring the typical insult to his name. That's what I want to know. The man had the audacity to laugh at them both. Now, Kakashi. You'll see, he said cryptically, eyes twinkling in amusement. Kakashi rolled his eyes at his excitement, falling back into his bored, crossed-arm posture. Shouldn't they be here by now? He said impatiently, finding fault in the two before they even arrived. Minato, though, only hummed in response, smiling cheerily to his annoyance. It was at that moment, two vaguely familiar men approached them from the distance. Kakashi squinted against the sunlight, caught on the distant blonde's hair. He looked like a teenager, yet awfully similar to his sensei's appearance. His hair glowed under the sun, and his personality seemed to echo that, with his lively, broad grin as he swept his arm in a large wave in greeting. He was acceptable, if it weren't for the bright orange of his clothes. Worse, he was a shinobi who wore orange. It was like painting a neon target on himself. Kakashi quickly lowered the teen's intellect to that of his Uchiha teammate, and then promptly disregarded him to turn to the older man he was with. At least, that was the plan. Kakashi didn't expect the familiar sight that clenched his heart tight. Suddenly he could see himself, once more, looking out to the distance, watching as Tsukumo came home from a long mission. He could see the man's silver hair, bouncing in each step, reflecting off a distinctive, shining gleam from the setting sun. He could remember himself crouching in the hallway, half drowsy, waiting for Tsukumo to unlock the door, to give his obligatory "I'm home," so that Kakashi could call back a soft welcome home, because diligent soldier Tsukumo was. That was usually the extent of their interactions, though Kakashi craved for more. Then he was 8, and that wretched man laid cold and empty on the tatami floor. Red seeped into the cracks. Kakashi remembered the numbness of his body, and that bitter voice in his head laughing at his wasted childhood, because he tried so hard to impress his father, but that coward had no qualms leaving him without a word. Kakashi lunged at the silver-haired man before he registered his own actions, forcing the orange boy beside him to jump aside in shock. That man just stood there, watching Kakashi approach, an indifferent look on his face. His own demons reared their heads. Why did it hurt to see him so dismissive and unfeeling? Because Kakashi had stopped caring for the opinion of others. He showed him it was a needless weakness. Kakashi's fist lashed out, involuntary words on his lips. "How dare you!" Kakashi hissed out. "You're not welcomed, you coward, you bastard!" A yellow flash grabbed his hand before it could pound down on the man's chest. Kakashi stiffened at his teacher's words. Slowly, his anger-fogged mind cleared, and he swallowed away his nightmares. Sakuma was dead. He saw him die. "Kakashi, meet Kabushi and Naruto," Minato said as Kakashi's brain recalibrated itself. The young Kakashi held back his initial instincts to snarl and hiss at the sight of that familiar face. Now that he had a closer look, past the looming figure, past the long silver hair, past the balanced gait of a professional shinobi, and past whatever else that had made the man seem so familiar, Kabushi's characteristics slowly diverged from those of his father's. Kakashi could see the resemblance between Sakuma and Kabushi, but there were subtle differences. The way Kabushi's stance was willowy and slouched, the way Kabushi's lone eye darted over them cautious, the way Kabushi's relaxed smile never reached his eye. "What the hell was that about, Kakashi?" Obito murmured, to which Kakashi only ignored. "And these are my little chunin, Kakashi, Obito and Rin," Minato continued over his students' concerned gazes. Rin dithered in hesitance, seeing the way Kakashi had snubbed Obito, but curiosity took the better of her. She turned towards her teammate and asked, "Do you know Kabushi, Kakashi?" "No," Kakashi denied bluntly, head jerking away. "Oh," she fumbled at his instantaneous rejection. Kabushi shook his head with a sigh. When Rin looked over, his one visible eye crinkled up in a lazy smile, and said in a tone where just as lackadaisical, "He's my nephew." Kakashi's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, nephew?" he said in a suspicious tone. "You know, a son of one's brother or sister." "I know what it means," the little genius snapped. "As far as I am aware, my father had no siblings." Rin's brows furrowed worriedly, and Obito looked excited at the conspiracy, but Kabushi only waved a hand dismissively. "Did he ever tell you that explicitly?" "No," Kakashi conceded grudgingly. His father was usually quite tight-lipped about family, or perhaps Kakashi never asked. Even the topic of his mother was never spoken much about, let alone anything about an uncle. He'd always been afraid of bothering his father by bringing up something he seemed to prefer avoiding, because their time together was already limited, and Kakashi hadn't ever wanted to do anything that drove him away. Yet, if Kabushi was his uncle, what did it mean that he never came back until now, 7 years after Sakumo's death? Where had he been when Kakashi had needed someone the most? The man, ignorant to his thoughts, smiled at him. "I am Sakumo's younger brother, your uncle by default." "Nice to meet you, kid," he said with a showy bow. "Now I'm told I'll be living with you. I can't wait to get to know you, dear nephew." Kakashi glanced over at Minato, who just nodded right back at him. "Go ahead, Kakashi. We'll meet up again tomorrow. These two are on our team from now on." He gave a cheery laugh. "Lucky me, I get a 5-man team." Kakashi's fist clenched as he turned on his heels. There was something about Kabushi that was slowly getting on his nerves. Perhaps it was how he looked, or perhaps what he could already tell of the man's personality from their few exchanged words. Kakashi didn't want to do this. He started down the road. "Are you coming or not?" Kakashi all but snarled, composure wearing thin. His uncle's face just drew up in a larger smile as he followed. "Calm, kid. A good ninja needs patience," he chimed casually back. Obito and the orange kid cackled in the background. Kakashi growled in response, storming the way back home. "I hate you," he muttered, when they were far enough away that Minato couldn't hear and scold him for his words. "Honesty is good," the man commented back, smile never leaving his face. Kakashi really hated him. Kakashi groaned as his alarm rang sharply in his ear. He groggily slipped out of bed, pushing his cover aside, and checked the time. 6:30 on the dot. That gave him 30 minutes, more than enough time, to get dressed and meet his team at 7 o'clock sharp. He didn't live in the old Hitaki house anymore. After his father's death, he moved into an apartment, unable to stand the old house, full of ghosts and stained blood. It was a small, cozy apartment with 3 main rooms, the bedroom, a kitchen, and a living room. It was big enough for one person. 2, and it was slightly cramped. He did, however, enjoy ordering his uncle to sleep on the couch, not that he would admit it, of course. Kakashi sniffed the air as he opened his bedroom door, brow narrowing downwards at the unexpected scent. "Finally up, are we?" A lazy voice drifted through the air. The silver-haired boy looked up to see his uncle standing awkwardly in an apron, holding 2 plates of pancakes in his hands. "Figured you might want some breakfast," the man said. The boy froze in place, staring at the scene before him. Somewhere in his mind, he remembered this sight, this feeling, buried deep in the crevices of his memories. His mind drew a flash of silver hair on another man, during those rare weeks Sakuma was in between missions. He remembered the man's beaming smile when Kakashi stumbled into the kitchen, lured by the smell, his eyes in anticipation as Kakashi took bites of his homemade food. It was, Kakashi banished the thought. "Thank you," he said neutrally, because Kabushi was only doing his job. It was the obligation of a family member to take care of the younger. Nothing more. He eyed the pancakes Kabushi settled on the table as though they would leap at him at any moment. It was odd, not having to make breakfast himself. He'd been forced to independence since early in life. Having homemade food appear before him without needing to do work himself seemed almost like a foreign concept. You're supposed to bring it up to your mouth. Chew, swallow, and repeat, his uncle, Kabushi, reminded him, his lone visible eye already in a U-shaped crease of a smile, as Kakashi continued to stare unmovingly at the plate before him. You'll get the hang of it eventually, Kabushi commented. The teen's eyes narrowed into a glare, while the older Hotake gave him a pat on the head. Well, I guess if it's too embarrassing, I'll give you and your food some privacy. He got up, and Kakashi noticed that somehow, the man was already finished eating. Kabushi held up a tired hand in a mock wave. See you on the training ground. Alone once more, Kakashi lowered his gaze onto the pancakes. The table suddenly seemed to grow larger, and he felt something in his chest he couldn't recall enough to describe. It was gone by the time he hooked his finger around his mask to pull it down to cautiously inspect the food before him. He's late again, Kakashi complained, arms crossed. He stood in their designated training grounds with Minato-sense, Rin and that Naoe kid waiting impatiently for Obito to show up. Minato consoled with the usual, it's only been an hour, Kakashi. Obito will be here soon. The silver-haired boy rolled his eyes. Kakashi was sick and tired of Obito's excuses, but the idiot never got it through his thick skull how improper it was for a shinobi to be unable to follow a rule as simple as this. Minato sat on the ground with that orange boy and Rin talking about their day, like it was an excusable problem. Didn't anyone else mind? A bush on his left shook, and Kakashi tensed as he looked over to it with a kunai in hand. A mob of black hair popped out, orange goggles under them, over the face of one, Obito Yukiya. Sorry! The boy yelled quickly, hopping out. There was a black cat in my path so I had to take another one, and Kakashi threw up his hands in anger. You liar. You're a shinobi, follow the shinobi rules and regulations. Don't be like that, Kakashi, Minato said, holding his hands out in a calming gesture. He's a chunin, not some pre-genin who spends their day playing. He needs to act like one. The orange boy shrugged. It's no biggie, Naoe joined in, irking Kakashi even more with their collective nonchalance at the blatant disregard for rules. Besides, it was only an hour. Just an hour? Are you saying we should ignore regulations? A ninja diligent and on time. Obito has not just been late for one day, it's an hour late every single day. Even academy students know better than that, Kakashi snipped, glaring at Obito who was snarling back at him. Naoe let out a short laugh. Exactly, just an hour. I've had worse. Besides, Kabushi-sensei's not here yet, Kakashi tisted, annoyed because Naoe's defense was full of holes. Just because he had been stood up for longer than an hour before did not make Obito's tardiness any less of an offense. Although, Naoe was right about one thing, where was his uncle? A Hotake should know better than to come late, especially if Kabushi left the apartment before he did. The air beside him swirled unnaturally the moment he thought that, and a second later, Kabushi and his silver-haired glory appeared with a saluting, yo. With a kunai in hand posed to stab, Kakashi glared at his sad excuse of an uncle. You're late. The man merely smiled at him, dismissing his accusation with a simple wave of a hand. Well, you see, there was this black cat, and it crossed my path, and we all know that's bad luck, so I turned around and took a bath to rid of the curse. Then while I was at it, I decided to make some brunch to eat since I was at the apartment anyways. He gave a bright smile, looking much too innocent for it to be nothing but a lie. I told you there was a cat, Obito declared, prodding the boy's side in I told you so manner. Kakashi growled under his breath and shoved the Uchiha away. For all he knew, the two of them collaborated on that story. Hey, you're early for once. Naoe cheered from behind, startling the young silver-haired boy out from his fuming state. Early? It had been more than an hour, and frankly Kabushi beat Obito's record. The older man's eye retained that happy crease Kakashi was starting to hate. I figured it was a special day, so my obligatory 3 hours tardy streak could wait for another meeting, Kabushi replied, sound much too serious for that to be a joke. 3 hours? Minato obviously felt the same way. You're usually 3 hours late? He asked warily, and for once disapproving of unpunctuality, unlike the dozens other times they had to wait for Obito to arrive. At least. Naoe moaned in response, the longest he's kept me waiting is 5 hours. And he told me not to eat breakfast if I didn't want to throw up from his training. Can you believe him? Minato scared at Kabushi who chuckled sheepishly. 5. Rin exclaimed, because that single hour they had to wait for Obito already tested her patience sometimes. Yet Naoe had no choice to wait because Kabushi was his sensei. What do you do to end up 5 hours late? Rin wondered out loud. He gets lost on the road of life, Naoe answered with a grin. Ma, don't forget Naoe. I stopped to help little old ladies carry their bags across the street too, the man added pointedly. Kabushi didn't even look ashamed. Kakashi stared incredulously, finger twitch on his hold of his kunai. His posture tense ready. Minato-sensei stood up, dusting off his pants and quickly got to business, before the teen acted out his anger. I'm glad we're all vigilant shinobi. but getting back at the task I had planned for today. His ninjas professionally snapped to attention. Training with the yellow flash was just like how Kabushi remembered it to be. The man was kind and helpful, but also strict when it was needed, opposed to the handoff method Kakashi used to teach his own Team 7, urging his kids to make their own decisions and challenge each other. While he stood in the sidelines watching over them, Minato was hands-on the whole way, actively working with his kids and guiding them along the way with encouraging praises. Each to their own, Kakashi supposed there was no proper way of teaching shinobi, after all. Minato-sensei was intelligent, curious, and always looking for a challenge, while Kakashi was apathetic and better suited in supervision. Their methods suited their own style. Minato wasted no time integrating the two travelers into their training. It was the second day at Training Area 57, and he was already asking them for a mock spar. "You feel up to it, Kabushi?" Minato asked with a blinding grin that was everything Kabushi remembered of the good old days. Of course he was. "Oh! Naruto cried enthusiastically, running up to them and hopping up and down in excess excitement. Let me! The teen begged. The constant flickering of Naruto's eyes onto Minato's figure told Kabushi more than he needed to know about the source of the blonde's energy. Naruto really wanted to test himself against the man he looked up to. Well, Minato began, looking apologetic, because he noticed Kabushi had been a second away from accepting his challenge already. "Let him," Kabushi insisted. "Let us postpone our spare for another day, Minato-san." It was every boy's dream to fight against the fourth once in their lives, even more so for Naruto, whose longtime idol was also his father. Besides, it was better like this. While Naruto wasn't exactly chakra exhausted, he did still have less chakra than usual. Hopefully that would stop the boy from getting too out of control, as Naruto tended to do in friendly spars. More so now that Naruto had Sasuke back and ready to butt heads with him daily. Kabushi tracked his student's happy clamber over to where Minato was standing with narrowed eyes, trying to project his plead into the boy's mind. "Don't mess up, Naruto." The blonde gave him a small nod in understanding, before most likely forgetting everything when his eyes then lit up at the idea of bonding with his dad. Kabushi sighed. "You ready, kid?" Minato grinned, slipping into a ready stance with the seal of confrontation held before him. Naruto followed suit. "You betcha, old man." The boy cheered, cracking his knuckles. "On your mark." Minato chuckled. "Old man? I'll show you old." Then, true to his namesake, in a flash of yellow, he was gone. The fight had officially begun. "So, how much do you want to bet Naruto's gonna lose to our sensei?" Obito asked, stretching on the grass where the other four of them were supposed to be training on their own. However, they were too busy observing the spar to do anything else. Well, three of them were. Little Kakashi was diligently following orders, after only a brief argument with Obito when the other teen wouldn't listen. Still, it wasn't hard to spot Kakashi's unpolished movements, as his attention was clearly elsewhere, head occasionally turning too much over to the two blondes on the field. "Of course he will," Kabushi replied carelessly, pulling out a book from his front pocket to help pass the time. Rin gave Kabushi an exasperated look. "You don't have faith in Naruto's abilities?" the girl asked in a chiding tone. "He's your student, isn't he? I'm sure he's also quite strong." Kakashi hummed undiscernibly, flipping the page of his orange book. Maybe," the man finally acknowledged with a shrug, smiling internally at the sweetness of her. If Kabushi wouldn't encourage Naruto, she didn't hesitate to take up the job, because everyone deserved positive reinforcement. Obito frowned at his nonchalant mannerism. "So you think Naruto has a chance?" he clarified, since Kabushi's answers were all over the place. He wondered if the Hokage was even properly listening to them anymore, engrossed in the book as he was. "Nope. Naruto is strong when he's passionate enough," Kabushi clarified to Obito's confusion. "But well, he's an idiot," he said idly, never looking up. As to prove him correct, Naruto suddenly gave a little hey. From where he was, turning to them with his hand on his hips. "I heard that, sensei." "Who are you calling an idiot?" Minato took Naruto's distraction as an opportunity to attack. With a swift kick, Naruto was launched to the ground, thrown back 10 feet away. Naruto spat out grass from his mouth. "Hey, I wasn't ready," he whined, but he was up and rushing for Minato a second after. "What did I tell you?" Kabushi sighed. In the field, the two blondes duked it out, trading blow for blow. Naruto was naturally fast. Not nimble, but quicker than most of his fellow rookies. His speed, stamina, and unnaturally large reservoir of chakra were nothing to scoff at. Minato, on the other hand, had his intelligence and speed. Speed that not even Naruto could match. He wasn't called the Yellow Flash for nothing, after all. And so, Naruto quickly found himself in a bind. It turned out no matter how strong he was, if he couldn't hit the man he was after, there was no fight worth talking about. The younger blonde threw another punch again, just barely missing the jounin as the older man turned away. "Damn it, you old geezer, stay still for a second," Naruto cried out in frustration. Minato responded with a swipe of his leg, successfully tripping the poor boy. "If I'm so supposedly old, and you can't touch me, just how old does that make you?" he teased good-naturally. Another punch was thrown at the man, only to have him disappear in a blink of an eye, in a haze of yellow. "Shoot!" Naruto slid on the ground, clutching his head. Ow! Stop hitting me! Stop dodging!" The boy howled in pain. You can do better than this, Naoe. The Namikaze cooed, his tone still as teasing as ever. This old man's not even gotten a hit on him yet. Naruto growled in response before his eyes lit in mischief at his challenging words. Never take Naruto as one to back down on a direct challenge. Oh, you want to get bruised? Naoe retorted. His finger formed a familiar cross as he focused on the other man before him. So focused he didn't even notice Kabushi hissing out a quiet don't at him. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. In an instant, the whole forest turned orange. Minato faltered. Before the Jounin's thought process developed anything future than the single thought of how? The whole gang of Naoes took advantage of his hesitation. Like orange leaves during mid-autumn, they descended down, covering every inch of the floor. Not even the yellow flash could escape an attack like that without being scratched. The boy whooped in triumph, surrounding the other man. You don't mess with Naruto. Futon de Tapa. Wind style. Great destruction. A flurry of wind tore out from the center of the explosion, shredding everything in its path. The Naruto clones quickly dispersed by 5s and 10s from the lash of wind, successfully cutting down their numbers by more than half. The boy in the orange jumpsuit could feel his heart thump with excitement. His dad was so strong. It was like everything the history books had said, and then some. He was so giddy and pumped. The remaining Narutos leaped towards the closest tree trunk, using it as a hard surface to propel themselves towards the future Hokage. The man disappeared yet again. Damn it! They yelled in unison, before they all crashed into each other and dispelled on their own. Naruto, alone once more, pushed himself off the ground. You're not doing that to me again. He grabbed a handful of shuriken. Oh really? Again, there was a flash of yellow, and Naruto found himself pushed to the ground, arms pinned behind his back, his throwing stars scattered around him. You think that's going to stop me? Naruto sang, lips widening into a toothy grin. Before he could continue, a scold from Kabushi cut him off. What? Naoe whined, limbs losing their tenseness as he flopped to the ground at his teacher's order. Kabushi shook his head, putting away his book. He strode towards the two blondes with a calm smile on his lips. I think you have had more than enough exercise today, he told his student firmly. But I'm not tired yet, sensei. It was just getting good. Minato helped the younger boy up, glancing over at the older Hatake. Is he giving too much away? He murmured softly, in an almost accusing tone. His face, however, was schooled into a look of indifference. His sharp eyes glinted as he focused on Kabushi's face. The elder Kakashi blinked slowly. What? He asked, feigning confusion. But he wasn't surprised at Minato's justifiably suspicious manner because the jutsu that formed that mass of orange wasn't hard to miss. I just didn't want the kid to sprain anything. He just got out of the hospital a while ago, you know, Kabushi lied nevertheless. Care to tell me where you learned the Kage Bunshin? Minato asked instead, turning towards Naoe. Naoe frowned. In here, he finally realized the problem. He learned in a scroll, a forbidden scroll found in Konoha, because the Kage Bunshin was a Konoha technique that was highly guarded. Naoe shrugged. Some guy lied to me, he said succinctly, skimming over the truth. There was a secret he wanted and he lied to me to get it, so I stole the technique from him and never told him. Did this guy have a name? Minato questioned. Just how did some guy come across the Kage Bunshin, only to have it stolen away by a 15-year-old? How did a 15-year-old master the Kage Bunshin in the first place? And what did the guy lie to Naoe about? There were more questions generated from Naoe's answer than resolution. Naoe only crossed his arms, brow furrowing as he thought of his past. It's kinda hard to remember someone's name when it turned out he was trying to frame me, and kill me and Irika. And it turned out he was a nasty traitor who was lying to Irika as well for half his life, Naruto growled out at last. And that was a bit too much truth, Kakashi thought to himself, hand ready to snap out to cuff the blonde. But it seemed like Naruto was done ranting anyways. He didn't blame the boy and his anger though. If he knew anything about Irika-sensei, it was that the Chunin teacher had been one of the few people who saw Naruto for Naruto, and not the beast in his stomach. He'd heard the report from the third of how the man had taken a blow meant for Naruto, critically injured in the process. The man quickly became one of the most precious family in Naruto's life. Minato stored the name away, making note to relay the story to his Hokage. Naoe's explanation was passionate, and Minato didn't believe it was false. Naoe was the type to display his emotions on his face for all to see. Kabushi, on the other hand, was like Kakashi, seemingly indifferent, but complex underneath it all. Minato felt he could read Kabushi as easily as he could read the man's nephew. Perhaps he had a gift for reading Hatake emotions. Saiyan SEI. Obishio yelled abruptly, cutting him off from his thoughts. Are we continuing training or not? Yes, Minato called over. He gave the two newcomers a slight warning glance, before warming up again. Coming? He asked. Naoe quickly brightened up as he bounded over with Kabushi in tow. I'm worried, sensei. Obito drawled out sleepily with a yawn. Later that week, Kakashi couldn't help but agree with the Uchiha, not that he would ever say it out loud. Why are we doing D-ranked missions again? He asked instead, the blonde smiled amicably, kneeling on the muddy ground along with his students. I figured we should keep it easy, seeing as our two new members just recovered recently. He pulled up another weed and tossed it to the growing pile beside him. That was almost weeks ago, sensei. Orange-goggled boy whined. Now, Minato consoled, let them rest. For weeks, Team 7 fell into a relatively relaxed routine schedule of training and D-ranked missions. Especially relaxed, considering Obito and Kabushi's, mainly Kabushi's, chronic lateness. Minato managed to get the man to reduce his tardiness from 3 hours to 2 after taking a glance at Kakashi's fuming face each day. Naruto just laughed in the sidelines. Minato snuck a glance at them. Naruto was faring as well as Obito was, that is to say, slowly falling asleep. The boy, as he'd actually fought him already, was strong and had seemingly never-ending chakra and stamina. He was easily Chunin level, or maybe even higher. He was relatively hardworking especially when it came to training, and easy to get along with. He was also loud and occasionally obnoxious especially when around Obito. Those two were two of a kind. Kabushi, well, the first thing that came to mind about him was lazy. He was the complete opposite of Kakashi. He slouched, dragged his feet, ignored people, was late, and came up with ridiculous, Obito-worthy lies. But Minato knew better than to judge people from their displayed personality, especially ninjas. There were times when he'd see a glimmer of something in those supposedly lazy gray-blue eyes of his. Minato, in fact, kept an eye on the other man the whole time he fought the younger blonde. Kabushi pretended to be bored, but his eyes flickered with the fight and he grimaced at all the right moments. And even now, the man, he could see, could certainly multitask. Kabushi was squat down on the ground, orange book in one hand, other hand mechanically pulling weeds out of the ground. A book right now seemed like a really good idea, actually. Little Kakashi looked over at his very sorry excuse of an uncle, who had his face buried in a little orange book. You should be working, he bit out. The older man gestured to his pile of weeds without looking up. Kakashi frowned at him. You really? Hey, is that book any good? A voice called over. Minato-sensei grinned, walking over, wiping his hands on his pants. You seem quite engrossed in it. You don't want to read it, sensei, Kakashi replied for his uncle, in a rather disgusted tone. The book shut with a snap as Kabushi stored it back in this inner vest pocket. The blank orange cover, or rather the flip dust cover of his Ika, gave no clue to the title nor contents of the book. I thought you liked it, Kabushi teased. A blush creped on the boy's face, and Minato curiosity grew, wondering what could aggravate the normally stoic boy so much. It's porn. Where? Obito bounded over with Naruto in tow. Rin's growing blush proved she was eavesdropping on the conversation as well. Did I forget to mention that Kabushi-sensei's a pervert? Naruto asked cheerfully as he approached. Evidently, Kakashi murmured from under his mask. Obito bursted out laughing. Geez, Kakashi, I didn't know you were such a closet perv. A kunai was held to his throat from an enraged boy. I did not ask him to share it, he declared heatedly. Boys. Minato chided, no fighting. Besides, it's perfectly normal for a boy. Sensei. Kakashi all but whined. No. He didn't. Hatakis don't whine. He interrupted. It's his fault. He pointed at his ever-grinning uncle. Don't be like that. I asked if you wanted a bedtime story and you wouldn't answer me, so I took that as a yes. It meant are you stupid, not yes. Kabushi shrugged. Ma, how was I supposed to know? He blinked innocently. Say, you want to know what happened after Taiyuki fell into the hot spring while running after the bus to Shinan. Minato coughed. Kabushi, please refrain from reading porn to my students. The younger man shrugged again. All right. If the stretching of his mask was any indication, Minato could tell the man was grinning under it. You want to know about it then? Shina's a hot, busted woman with fiery red hair and a temper like no other. You should hear about all the things she can do to her man. Clearing his throat, Minato looked away. Anyways, he said quickly, least Kabushi start on the topic once more, that's enough for now. We have another mission tomorrow. One I'm sure we'll all be grateful for, he said, looking back towards the Hokage Tower. He gave his team a quick glance before strolling off. Best we rest up for tomorrow. In the Hokage Tower, you think they're ready? Hiruzen asked, as Minato reported his daily observations to his leader. For the C rank? Yes, Hokage-sama. The old man nodded thoughtfully, gaze cast out to the window of his office. The stone faces of the previous leaders stared back at him, like the strong, sturdy foundation of Konoha herself. I hope it goes well, he replied mildly. Minato smiled. I have the utmost confidence in my team. In the whole team. Though questionable their origins might be, the truth was, currently, there wasn't anything wary about the two. The strongest issue was Naoe's knowledge of a forbidden Konoha technique, but even that had a reasonable explanation. At some point in life, the jutsu hadn't been forbidden as it was now, displayed for shinobi of all nations to see in battle. It was simple for shinobi to pick it up after trial and error, and record it down for their own allies. Naoe could have easily met up with someone who had the knowledge under those conditions. Beyond that, Kabushi was a diligent uncle, and Naoe a polite house guest. Kakashi fumed under Kabushi's teasing, but it seemed to be doing the team favors, believe it or not, because instead of the stoic boy Minato was used to, the teen began showing his emotions more freely. Hiruzen took a puff of his pipe. This is your call, Minato, he replied to the blonde's confident words. Minato knew them best by this point, better than anyone else. The man possessed good instincts, and Hiruzen placed his trust in his judgment. I sincerely hope it goes smoothly. You leave tomorrow. Minato bowed deeply. I understand. Then, he shot the man a soft grin. You worry too much, Hokage-sama. I have trust in those two. What can possibly go wrong? Hiruzen blew smoke between his lips slowly, as Minato was dismissed from his office. Indeed, what could possibly go wrong? He parroted back to himself warily. Or were those famous last words? Naruto gave a whoop as he jumped up in the air with a celebratory fist pump. All right, C rank, Kakashi snorted in distaste. And this pleases you? We were doing B ranks and A ranks before you two came along. We all needed a rest anyways, Kakashi. We can't always take high-ranked missions, Minato cut in, right? The boy rolled his eyes. You just don't want to admit they're pulling us down, he murmured to himself. Naruto fought without thinking, had too many similarities to the annoying Uchiha on his team, plus he wore fluorescent orange of all colors. His uncle was lazy, half-blind, perverted, and giggled while reading that nasty little book of his. Team 7 could do a lot better without those two lowering their standards. We'll leave as soon as Kabushi gets here, Minato merely said. Yes, plus Kabushi was always late. I can't wait that long, sensei. Let's just leave without him. Obito whined impatiently. He rocked on his heels, unable to stay still. They finally had something other than D ranks or training, and the anticipation was killing him. Now you know how we feel when you're late, Kakashi drawled mockingly. The other boy gave a huff. It's not like I do it on purpose. Rin sighed at the thought of an incoming fight between her boys. She purposely turned away, pulling Naruto into conversation, because Obito was easily distracted and she knew the two were keeping an ear out over her. Hey Naruto, Rin asked curiously, is there any way to convince Kabushi to come on time? The blonde shrugged. I don't know, never tried. Kabushi-sensei does whatever he wants. He tilted his head. But well, sensei already coming earlier than usual, isn't he? He said because they'd managed to shorten his 3-hour streak to 2. Because that's a huge improvement, Kakashi muttered dryly, sarcastically. Naruto wasn't bothered by his attitude. In a way he reminded him of Sasuke and Naruto was amused more than anything. If it bothers you so much, you do something about it, he said, passing on the responsibility. He hummed and hawed to himself before lighting up with an abrupt idea. Hey, I bet if you tell Kabushi-sensei you want to spend more time with him, he'll come earlier. You do it, Kakashi shot back, because he refused to be near his uncle more than necessary. The man was already living with him, and Kakashi hated it. But then it won't work. Naruto complained promptly. Kabushi-sensei wants to get to know you better. That's stupid, Kakashi retorted. I refuse, he said as bluntly as possible. To the side, Minato mused over Naruto's idea to himself. Then his eyes lit up mischievously, almost mirroring the other blonde. If Kakashi didn't know better, he would have sworn those two were related. Like Naruto said, Kabushi's tardiness really seems to bother you, Kakashi. Isn't it worth a harmless promise? He contributed in a teasing tone. The boy snorted. Promise to spend more time with him? Kakashi uttered harshly in ridicule. I might as well promise to treat him lovingly for being the thoughtful uncle he is, he mocked. Because either was ever going to happen. Ever. What sort of thoughtful uncle was Kabushi if he insisted on persisting on being tardy, Kakashi's pet peeve, and tried to force porn literature onto him? Speak of the devil, Kabushi immediately appeared in a swirl of leaves. Did I hear my precious nephew say he'll love me dearly, and deeply like the lovely, cute nephew he is? Suffocating me in his adoration and affection like I've always wanted? He crooned sweetly, eagerly, hateful smile on his face. Kakashi twitched, because that was the only response he would allow seen by the older man. No, he bit out, but I'll suffocate you, all right. He crossed his arms, shooting Kabushi a narrowed gaze. Were you spying on us? He demanded. Of course not. Whatever gave you that idea? Kabushi cried innocently. You expect me to believe the timing was a coincidence? Kakashi muttered under his breath. Kabushi happily ignored the contents of his words, focusing on the tone instead. Worse, he didn't even take note the tone was directed at him. Muttering is a really bad habit for a shinobi, especially if you're planning to be a commander, Kabushi offered helpfully, sounding so pleased at himself for assisting the growth of his nephew's shinobi career. The boy fumed. If you were here the whole time, you should have come out sooner. We have a mission to complete, he said, sharp and straight to the point. Kabushi Tiskad, don't be silly. I just got here a minute ago, dear nephew. Kakashi grumbled and resisted his urge to roll his eyes. Kabushi brought out the worst in him. He felt like he pulled along the man's fun and games every time, and Kakashi hated how powerless he was against it. It was like Kabushi knew all the right buttons to push to get a rise out of him. Minato's warm hand settled on his back, quelling the growing tense form he was becoming. Dare I ask what kept you this time? The blonde asked, as he led the team towards the main gates of Konoha. Kabushi followed casually behind him, eye lingering on the interaction between student and teacher. His expression seemed to soften before drawing upwards in his typical idle smirks, excuse ready as always. Ma, I thought I heard Mr. Uki calling for me, but in the end, it turned out to only be his great-granduncle, he grinned. I hope he wasn't in any danger, Minato responded offhandedly, already knowing not to read too much into the stories Kabushi fed them. The silver-haired man let out a short laugh. Nah, just a little dehydrated. Naruto just raised an eyebrow at his sensei. Do you understand the mission? The five-man cell nodded in response. They were to go to the land of rivers and escort a young silk merchant to Konoha, where she would stay for a week, selling her rolls of brocade. Later, they would be assigned to escort her back as well. I didn't think traveling merchants would hire ninjas for bodyguards. How do you make money if you have to pay for escorts every time? Rin asked curiously. Well, normally they wouldn't, but apparently the girl's father fell ill, and she wants to make his rounds for him, Minato answered. But we really shouldn't be questioning our clients, Rin. The girl flushed and dropped the topic. Yes, sensei. The blonde gave her an appreciative smile, before turning towards their newest members. Have you two been there before? He asked, curious. Kabushi hummed a wordless reply, recalling his memories of that place. If he was correct, Land of Rivers was where they found their first Akatsuki hideout. He doubted the area was as dangerous as it was in the future. I believe so, he answered vaguely, and didn't bother to elaborate. They were supposed travelers, after all, and it wasn't odd for them to have been around the nation. It was a little later before conversation started once more. Rin was the route this time. Kabushi had noticed her glancing hesitantly at him over the journey to Rivers, slowly building up courage to ask. Kabushi didn't doubt his abrupt conclusion to the previous conversation had her worrying about prodding into his issues, though she was clearly curious. Kabushi, she began at last, and Kabushi looked over with an encouraging smile. Bravery deserved reassurance. If you don't mind me asking what happened to your eye? There was a concerned glimmer in the depths of her eyes, and Kabushi felt flattered at being included in her care. It was a shame Kakashi was nothing like her. Knowing him, it's probably a stupid fashion statement, the teen said snidely. Ha! Obito laughed, like you're any better. You guys have the same mask. So you're stupid yourself too? Boys, Minato chided. Kabushi let their familiar bickering wash over him. He touched the Hittite covering his left eye, glancing over at the two, recalling similar days of his own past. It's a result of my stubbornness, he simply said, because the truth, or anything close, would be too much for them to handle. Maybe even too much for him to handle, really, because he still regretted it to this day. Minato had seen the long scar underneath when he'd visited Kabushi in the hospital. Out of courtesy of others' battle scars, he'd never questioned what happened to his eye. The scar had been deep, he'd noticed back then, and Minato doubted Kabushi's eye survived. Doesn't the depth perception bother you? It must be hard being a ninja with a handicap like that, Rin wondered inquisitively. The Hokage presented a gentle smile to the girl. You get used to it, he said, bitterly adding, it serves as a reminder of selfishness, and the pain and loss that it comes with. Rin nodded solemnly, and stored his words away. Because odd as Kabushi was at times, he said worthwhile things at times. Kabushi's voice was strained as he tilted his head back, staring into the distance. Sometimes no matter how much it hurts, it's better to remember rather than to forget. Especially if it turns you to a better person because of it. Even Kakashi wasn't able to find fault in his serious disposition. His view of the man was ever-changing. Until now he'd always seen the man as an annoyance who only knew to joke. Yet from now, it was clear the man had his share of pain and losses. True to a shinobi's ability, in a blink of an eye, Kabushi's solemn expression suddenly held an indifferent mask of a smile once more, and the mood passed. Still, the team knew better than to doubt their sights. How about we rest for a bit? Minato commented, stopping abruptly. We haven't gotten far yet. Minato nodded agreeably but said, though this may be a C rank, we need to keep on the top of our game. It's a good time to take a break. We can make up for the distance later. The team settled to the ground, following his lead. The future Hokage leaned against the tree trunk, stretching his arms above his head. Naruto, Kabushi, can you two secure the area? Of course, Minato-sen, Kabushi answered, almost slipping because the command was too much like his years in the past, carrying out his sensei's orders. Come along, Naruto. The two darted cautiously from the main group, checking for any signs of danger along the way. Naruto was laughing the whole way through. What's so funny, brat? The silver-haired man asked. The teen giggled to himself, teasing haughtily. You're being ordered around too, Kabushi hummed. He supposed it was a rare sight because in their actual timeline, there weren't many who had rank to order him to action. Especially considering every time Naruto had missions with him present, Kakashi was typically the team commander. I guess it's been a while since I've been told to follow orders instead of giving it, he said to indulge the boy. You're the same rank as me now. Naruto laughed, milking the event for all it was worth. Kabushi quirked his eyebrow in response. That's what he got for entertaining the kid. Oh ho, it sounds like someone wants to be ordered around more. The humorless eye smile came back in full force. Don't forget I'm still your teacher, Naruto. He waved his hand in a dismissing gesture. Now go secure the area. The demon container frowned. Hey! What about you, sensei? He demanded. The Jounin merely held his smile. I'll be here reading. Lazy, Naruto retorted, stomping away. Yes, Kabushi dismissed, face in book. Pervert. I completely agree. Bum. Hey, I resent that the older man cut himself off. Kaka Kabushi-sensei? Naruto asked. The Jounin held a finger to his lips. Sure. I heard something. They sat in silence, ears alert. And yet there was no other sound. Naruto glanced skeptically at his teacher. Are you sure? He began. But any doubt was gone as soon as he too heard the distinct sound of several someone's disturbing the leaves of the trees ahead. The older man jerked his head back, gesturing towards the others. Naruto, go warn the other four. I'll go see if I can make out who's out there. The boy nodded wordlessly, jumping back. Kabushi leaped forward, keeping on the trees. He weaved around the leaves, trying not to make any excessive noise. It was then he saw the ones behind the noise. There were roughly 5 of them, quite professional, judging from their movements and their silent form of communication with each other. Yet they were too far for Kabushi to make out their Hittite or loyalties. But the way they moved, slow, cautious, and wary, nudged at the time traveler's paranoia. They were too slow, too cautious, too wary, especially if they were allied with the Land of Fire. They acted too careful in Leaf's land to be possible allies. No, they were hunting something, and Kabushi needed to warn Team 7. The silver-haired man retreated, eager to regroup with Naruto to relay the information to Team 7. He moved as quietly as ever, but not quietly enough, it seemed, because he soon found himself locked in battle. Kabushi leaped to the side as a fury of kunai lodged itself into the tree he was in. The man swore, twisting his body to face the enemy. Men rushed at the jounin, faces obscured by masks, and Hitayatesh nowhere to be seen. For a fraction of a second Kabushi considered they were not shinobi, because even newcomers kept their headbands, however movements and chakra manipulations stated otherwise. Who are you? Kabushi demanded, twisting to avoid yet another attack. What country do you belong to? They snarled at him, never answering, and attacks doubling in strength every second. With a kick of his legs, Kabushi launched himself into the safety of another tree. State your loyalties or I shall be forced to engage in battle, he said, a mild bluff, because it was obvious Kabushi didn't have the upper hand, 1 against 5 as it was. They refused to talk. All right, have it your way. The silver-haired man drew his weapons. Before he had time to even throw them, the men were already in his face, brandishing swords to attack. They were fast, Kakashi would give them that. It seemed like he'd underestimated them. A shuriken whizzed past his face, lodging itself into the vest of one of the enemy. Kabushi jumped backwards, pushing off with a hand. Thank you, Naruto, he said calmly, recognizing the swirling chakra behind him. You're getting old, Naruto laughed as his eyes focused on the ninja ahead. Yes, mock your teacher, Kabushi said idly, his attention also focused on the enemy nin. He leaped backwards as he heard his old sensei's voice, throwing shurikens in front of him to hinder the enemy from following. Minato-san. The older blonde nodded at him, surveying the enemy. He kept his chunin standing behind him, despite their protests. Do you know what they want? He asked crisply. No sir, Kabushi replied, I can't see any headbands, but they are surely ninjas. I see. Minato tilted his head towards his back. Kakashi, Obito, Rin, fall back. Secure the area behind us. Obito scowled at the orders. But sensei, we can help with the fighting too, he pleaded. The blonde gave a minuscule frown. Obito, listen to my orders. I'll join you to give further instructions later. Now go. Kakashi nodded, unable to disobey his commander, even though he was clearly ready for a fight. His eyes were narrowed, and limbs tense and loaded with weapons, ready to prove himself worthy in battle. It was too bad his belief in the rules and regulations stated that Minato's words could not be disregarded. Reluctantly, the 3 leaped away, leaving Minato, Kabushi, and Naruto to face the enemy alone. Our orders, sir? Kabushi asked once the kids were out of their sight. Minato nodded, tilting his head towards Naruto. I want you 2 in front. I've seen what Naruto can do, and I think he can handle it. You as well. The 2 of them suddenly ducked a volley of kunai, slipping behind a tree to finish outlining the strategy. Minato cut it as short as he could. Naruto in front left, Kabushi in front right. My kids are taking rear, and I'll be keeping an eye on both groups to assist. Questions? Kabushi nodded, biting his lip from expressing his desire to watch over the younger 3 as well. The life of shinobi were full of dangers, but recalling how the dangers of the past lost him Obito and Rin, made his heart clench in need to excessively protect them all. He'd lost them even when he had been so close by, unable to help. Kabushi almost feared this would be another case like that. But no, Naruto needed help up front. Besides, there was no one Kabushi trusted more than Minato to watch over the kids of Team 7. Understood, Kabushi replied. The silver-haired man leaped back towards the enemy approaching, feeling Minato's chakra grow smaller as the man retreated further and further away. With a quick detour to inform Naruto of the plan, Kabushi quickly shifted all his focus on the enemy nin, engaged into battle. Kabushi hadn't underestimated the enemy, but their strengths were above what he hoped. He had a self-imposed restriction of using only common jutsu, which wasn't too hindering, other than the fact it too much fancy maneuvering that could be avoided. He needed to do this strategically without wasting chakra unnecessarily, especially considering just how many of them there were. He highly doubted he would be given many chances to attack, so every move counted. Metal caught the light, and that was the only warning Kabushi got before a hidden ninjato slashed upwards at him. A weapon as well? The Konoha time traveler murmured to himself, already readjusting his battle plan to account for that fact. He shifted his lone gray-blue eye to look behind the man. The second nin had brandished out his large broadsword ages ago, not that it was really possible to hide in the first place. The third enemy, yes, it was an unfair battle of 3 against 1, stuck with the traditional kunai and shurikens. Although, Kabushi had a sneaking suspicion that he had a hidden weapon on him as well. 6 hand seals later, Kabushi let out a long breath with a katan, great fireball jutsu. The scorching fireball caused the 3 enemy before him leap out of his way, squinting their eyes against the bright flame. That was all the distraction Kabushi needed. He leaped at the first enemy, knocking the man down before he had time to recover. He spared some chakra for lightning clones to keep the other 2 busy while he took care of the first one. The enemy was down just as a goddammit echoed from Naruto's side. Kabushi spared a glance over to check on his student. True to Naruto's nature, the boy had a plethora of shadow clones running around trying to end things with brute force, which sounded more useful than it really was. The 2 shinobi Naruto was against knew how to work together, and know how to do it well. Clones were knocked aside quickly and efficiently before they could do sufficient damage. Unlike Kakashi, the boy's knowledge of jutsu was limited. In battle, Naruto always fell back to his trusty Kagebushin and Rasengan, yet this time, other than the first jutsu, it was obvious his most powerful offense attack was sealed. It was much too recognizable. Worse, the jutsu's creator was present, and he would know he never taught anyone but Jiraiya. In the present, Naruto was growing furious. Kabushi could see the teen wanting to forget everything and Rasengan everyone to finish the fight once and for all. Honestly, Kabushi didn't doubt that Naruto would do it too, if he still couldn't get anywhere within the next few minutes. Kicking aside the fallen ninja he finally took down, Kabushi raced for the other 2. He had to finish this quick and get to Naruto before he did anything stupid. That, of course, was easier said than done. Even if he could use his full power and famed jutsu, these men were good. The silver-haired man glanced over at his student, who was practically getting pummeled by the enemy. It hurt to see because his student should have to suffer like this when he so clearly was able, if he was only allowed to let loose. Yet he couldn't because Kabushi had the blonde to promise him to keep his talents to himself, because they couldn't get caught in the past. Kabushi was the reason Naruto was hurting. Kabushi let out a hiss of frustration. It would be hard and tiring, but they could still win this, couldn't they? A jounin, a sage, who wasn't allowed to use his sage powers, a future Hokage, and 3 chunins. They were plenty strong. They could wait. There was something wrong. Every limb in his body froze momentarily, before he forced it to move. Breathe, Kakashi. Focus. The silver-haired man cast out his chakra, trying to sense what had suddenly disappeared while he was busy fighting. Minato and the kids should have been right behind them, should have been close enough for Kabushi to sense, but there was nothing there. Where were they? The Hitaki knew Minato-sensei would take care of his students even if it cost him his life. That's why he left them under his care and focused entirely on the battle instead. But their chakra signatures were missing. Either they were too far away, but they shouldn't be, they were the rear guards, or they were dead. Kabushi's heart thumped in his chest, as he jerked his head around to attempt to catch a glimpse of the 4 who were supposed to be behind. He could still sense Naruto dashing about to the right of him, but where? Damn it, Kabushi hissed out in pain. In front of him, the unknown enemy snarled. In his hand held a ninjato, much like the weapon of his fallen comrade. If you have time to look around, you must really be begging to die, aren't you? His blade reflected the sunlight dangerously, Kabushi's blood dripping off of it in victory. He rushed in for another attack. I don't have time for this, Kabushi snapped, clutching his arm to staunch the bleeding. Where are the other 4? If possible, the ninja's smirk grew even larger, and suddenly, nothing mattered to Kabushi anymore. The knowing smirk was all the confirmation Kabushi needed. Ah, the blonde and those 3 weak little children. No, Kabushi breathed out. He inhaled a fruitless attempt to keep his emotions in check. No. Everything swirled in his head. Rin, Obito, little Kakashi, Minato-sensei, he couldn't lose them again. There was red coating his eyes, as the memory of their blood-soaked bodies laid out before him. Obito with his hollow eye, Rin with her hollow chest, and Minato entwined in death with his precious wife. He'd failed them once. And what was he doing here if he was only failing them again before they were even scheduled to die? Even without the necessary 3 hand seals, Kabushi's hand started to glow blue. Electricity crackled around him, forcing the man to step back in fear. A sphere of blue electrical chakra swirled in Kabushi's right hand. His muscles screamed in pain as he pushed himself into a blindingly fast leap towards the enemy nin. What the hell did you do to them? The one in front of him, hands still clutching the dripping ninjato, had no time to dodge. The one with the broadsword just barely had time to put the weapon between themselves and the crackling ninjutsu. Raikiri. The ball of electricity lodged itself into his blade, shattered it, and proceeded to crash into the enemy's blocking arms. Then momentum blew both men back. They were flung towards the rocks behind them, colliding into it painfully to create craters of an unbelievable sizes. Kabushi's fingers stung from the slightly overcharged lightning cutter, but he paid it no heed. From the corner of his eye, he saw the shinobi who'd been fighting on Naruto's side running towards him. He had to stay and fight, but Obshio, Rin, Kakashi, Minato-sensei, he had to find them too, before it was too late. Kakashi swore at the conundrum, leaping further back, towards Konoha. So much for keeping their identities a secret. His right hand swiped his blood, slamming it down to the ground as he landed. Keeping their secrets didn't matter if Team 7 died before their time. Kabushi was already filled with endless regrets from their past deaths, and this time, not just him, but Naruto would never forgive himself when he realized they were the cause of the team's early deaths in this timeline. Because Team 7 wouldn't have taken this mission if it weren't for them, and Team 7 wouldn't have forced Minato's attention to be so split between the two groups, thus lowering his efficiency, if it weren't for them. The ground glowed from Kabushi's jutsu. It struck Kabushi for a moment that the jutsu might not even work, because thought he did sign the summoning scroll, these weren't his Niken, not really. However, no one could track better than Pakken in the pack, and Kabushi had to try. Kuchios no, the rest of the summoning jutsu died on his lips suddenly as his nose caught a scent he hadn't noticed earlier. Kabushi straightened slightly, sniffing the air again. His eyes trained on the oncoming ninjas in front of him, his hands still on the ground in the middle of his summoning. The stench of blood still lingered in the air, but less prominent now that he was further away, allowing him to pick out the other traces that swirled in the air. Kabushi sorted through the smells assaulting his nose, trying to locate the scent once more. And there, the recognition clicked and Kabushi fumbled to hold his reaction from showing. Then his eyes narrowed in thought because he was here, and here was the last place he should be. So why? And what did this mean for the fate of Minato and the Team 7 kids? The Hokage sat behind his desk, his hands clasped in front of his face in thought. In his mouth, he chewed his pipe, a habit he developed not long after obtaining the role of the Sandaime. Before him stood one of his loyal shinobi. Hiruzen nodded at his man. It seems you were quite right, he noted idly, calm as though he had known it all along. The ninja nodded, a small smirking smile playing on his lips at the Hokage's bluff, but his voice was respectful as always. Yes, there was nothing for you to worry about, Hokage-sama. Because he knew he had worried. No, I shouldn't have doubted your judgment, Hiruzen replied, shaking his head. You do know them best, don't you? The man gave a little laugh, blonde hair shaking from the movement. Well, he said cheerfully, we had every right to suspect the two travelers, and a sudden battle definitely allowed for us to finally see their true selves. The Hokage nodded thoughtfully, thinking back. True, the old man agreed, and the results were quite pleasing, he added as tension slowly fell from his shoulders. You seem to have quite the ability to judge people. In front of Hiruzen, the man gave another laugh. A small grin bloomed on his face. I sure hope I do, he said. He ran a hand quickly through his blonde hair. I place all my trust in Team Minato, the man in charge of the five-man cell said, confidently and proud. Or else I wouldn't have come to you proposing this, and really, there was no way his trust could have been misplaced. Not after the display Kabushi put on once he realized that his teammates were missing. In fact, both Kabushi and Naruto seemed to have bonded with Team 7 more than Minato had expected. That was a great thing indeed. The Sandaime gave another puff on his pipe. That young man is quite unexpected, he commented in a quiet murmur, just loud enough for the jounin in front of him to hear. Minato couldn't help but nod, mind reeling back to the past fight. He'll make a strong ally, the blonde stated positively. Hiruzen agreed, but his face didn't share Minato's cheeriness. And a terrifying enemy. Half a day ago, end of battle, Kakashi mind went on overdrive. Why was he of all people here? To make sure he hadn't been imagining things, he had discreetly changed positions to sniff the air again, and yet the scent was still present, and fresher than ever. He was here. But there was no reason for this to be. The masked man tried to calm himself, brain whirling to understand. Had he done something wrong for it to this point? For that man to come here and attack them without warning? Everything appeared fine when Team Minato departed for their mission. The fact that they were given a mission was evident that the Hokage trusted Naruto in him. Yet how did things change in such a short period of time? Change? The man froze abruptly, a thought clinging into his mind. His lone gray-blue eye flickered as he surveyed the situation. What was to say anything did change, Kakashi suddenly realized. In a matter of second, the silver-haired time traveler calmed down. His entire posture relaxed, though it wasn't too visible considering he was still vigilant against the attacking men. Knowing what he now did, Kabushi doubted Naruto and him would truly be killed by these shinobi, badly injured, perhaps, but not dead. Yet Kabushi just wanted the farce to end. He might have realized, but Naruto didn't. Excluding the fact Naruto was more than ready to rage out with all his actual skills, Kabushi hated the sight of his battered student. Against instincts, Kabushi forced himself to look away from the incoming men. Idly, as though he hadn't a care in the word, Kakashi gave a casual wave of his hand, turning momentarily towards the origin of the scent. Have we done something to warrant this? He wondered aloud, directed towards that general area. Is this an ambush to secretly dispose of the two of us? Kabushi asked, half-jokingly, using such morbid humor only because he didn't believe it to be true. He pushed the focus of the oncoming attacker to the back of his mind, straining most of his senses towards the hidden man. There was no answer from him. Without turning, Kabushi dodged yet another attack, jumping even closer to the hidden shinobi. I know you're there. The Hitaki nose has always been hailed rival to your Inizuka's, the masked man stated softly. Standing downwind doesn't help. Wind currents change rapidly, and all this fighting in front of you causes quite the whirlwind. Kabushi touched his hide to make sure it was fixed in place, before approaching. The closer he came, the angstier the enemy nin became, and it assured the silver-haired man he was heading the right direction. He leaped over a swing of the sword. I would hate to have to fight you, Kabushi said softly. Then, Hokage-sama, he hailed directly, so the man was certain there was no doubt who Kabushi had recognized. There was a pause. And quite frankly, fighting your Anbu is tiring, he added lightly, tilting his head towards the attackers. Silence greeted his comment. Kabushi shook his head. Let this be a show of his loyalty then, Kabushi proposed, and then stood still before the rushing men. If you believe I have done wrong, I will accept my punishment. I will not fight against the village I have pledged my alliance to, Kabushi stated calmly, even as his instincts screamed against his action. Kabushi held a hand to his face, the other fell lax by his side. His body fell to his usual lazy slouch, center of balance all wrong to be able to react on time. He was emitting an aura that spoke of his reluctance to retaliate. Do as you will, he acquiesced. The enemies, Anbu, rushed forward towards Kabushi without hesitation, even at his announcement, arms raised, ninjato, and broadswords ready. The time traveler stood and stared without as much as a twitch. Kabushi watched, eyes sharp and calm as bodies before him twisted, muscles bulged, as their weapons came forward as they brutally slashed. Cease. Everything froze on command. Nobody even seemed to dare to breathe until a comment called out from the sidelines. Why were you here, old man, Hokage-sama? Kabushi's eye flickered to his left where Naruto had slid off to when he heard the third's voice. He glanced back in front of him, a ninjato a mere hair's breadth away from his face. For a while, there was nothing but silence as both parties stood erect and still, waiting for their Hokage's orders. And then, Hiruzen walked forward, finally emerging from where he had hidden himself throughout the battle. His dark onyx eyes stared a calculative gaze at the Hitaki before him. What if I had not called them off? He stated, voice betraying nothing. There was no talk of if the Anbu could not stop in time, for Anbu did not fail. Kabushi shrugged, pulling down his Hittite. Sometime between declaring he wouldn't fight back, and the Anbu closing in on him, the headband had innocently slipped up, revealing the scarred, closed eye underneath. Kabushi, for in his Hokage's presence he would never be seen as Kakashi, drawled lazily. I'd like to think that I wasn't completely distrusted by my honorable leader. A hint of hopefulness weaved into his voice. Hiruzen studied the taller man intently. Kabushi politely stood under the old man's burning gaze without a word, allowing the Hokage to see all there was to see. Because if anything, his love for Konoha was as great as, if not more, than every other ninja under the old man's control. And honestly, Kabushi wished the Hokage would realize this as well. A moment passed as the two men stared impassively at each other. Then, as if finally accepting what he had to say, the Sandaime suddenly nodded, head tilting back to Konoha. His Anbu disappeared in a whirl of leaves without a word. Then, as though a veil was lifted from the world, everything seemed to return back to normal. The third smiled, all signs of tension immediately absent. He looked back at the remaining two shinobi on the field. Well then, let us head back, he said peacefully, like nothing was wrong. Naruto frowned. Hokage, what about the mission? He wondered, cerulean eyes wide and confused. The mission is over, Kabushi answered for him. What? Did we fail? What happened to the little girl? We were the mission. Huh? Naruto furrowed his brows in thought. Slowly, he recalled how the enemy nin all seemed to follow the Hokage's orders with the utmost respect. They weren't doing it out of fear either. You mean this was all a test? He asked as realization struck. Good, Kabushi murmured, glad Naruto was keeping up. Naruto, in turn, looked cross between delighted at being complimented, and horrified at the thought of his beloved Gigi attacking them. In the end, the boy settled with a large grin, a meaningless grin that held nothing behind it. It was, Kabushi noted, Naruto's facade when he didn't know what to do. He'd seen it plenty times enough to recognize it. As the three Konoha nin marched back home to the village, dreaded silence clung to the air. Naruto was too unsettled by the minor act of betrayal from his old man to chatter mindlessly, and Kabushi didn't feel like talking while the Hokage was within earshot. Hiruzen was fine with quietly observing the two ninjas beside him from the corners of his eyes. But no matter how Naruto was feeling, silence never bonded well with the blonde. So, as Kabushi had expected, not too long later, the boy broke the hush. Hey sensei, where are you? Naruto suddenly asked. Kabushi's even strides gave nothing away. I'm right here, the silver-haired man tried to correct without stirring up any more suspicion from their leader. Naruto blinked. Oh. He looked around. I mean the little guy who looks like you. You mean Kakashi? Yeah, the blonde rubbed his neck nervously. Yeah, Minyu. Kabushi rolled his sole visible eye, shaking his head. I suspect he, along with the rest of the team, is back at the village, waiting for our assessment to be over. He glanced over at the Sandaime for confirmation. The old man nodded. Correct. The blonde pursed his lips at that. A moment later he nodded to himself. Well, I'm glad they're safe, at least, Naruto said. Kabushi's masked face was blank as he patted his student gently on the head. Yeah, me too, he murmured softly, and the Hokage could hear the sincerity in his voice. Me too. Present, Kabushi slipped into the woods of an unused training ground, mind set on working on his jutsus. After the little test the Hokage gave Naruto and himself, the Anbus watching them decreased ever so slightly. Obviously they passed whatever criteria they were looking for. It wasn't any surprise to Kabushi that they had passed. Whether they were in the past or future, Naruto and himself were proud, loyal shinobi of Konoha through and through. They would never let anything happen to a comrade if they could help it, because that was what Kabushi taught his precious students since the day he received them. Kabushi sat down cross-legged on the grass, fingers locked in a ram symbol. He closed his eyes as chakra swirled around him. A soft crunch sounded from behind the man. It was almost inaudible, but nothing the former Anbu captain couldn't detect, especially because the opposition was nothing more than a young chunin. Kabushi turned slowly, allowing a grin to grow on his face, even at the annoyance of being interrupted. My little nephew missed me so much he just had to seek me out. He crooned happily, sounding so pleased it gave heartburn. The figure behind the tree walked out stiffly. Of course not. Kakashi snapped, silver hair glistening as he passed over a spot of light. Kabushi could feel the boy's gray-blue eyes linger over his bandaged hand. He knew the teen's gaze wasn't from worry, and Kakashi's next words proved him right. I want to know what jutsu you used, the kid demanded. Kabushi tried a look of innocent confusion. What jutsu? Where? That only caused the younger boy to roll his eyes irritatedly, a gloved hand jabbing at Kabushi's chest. Look, the Hokage explained to Minato-sensei what happened after they shoved us back into the village. Since you lived with me, I obviously had the right to know too. His eyes narrowed into a glare. You did some lightning jutsu to the Anbus, strong enough to break his sword and throw several men back. I want to know what it was. Kakashi demanded, eyes daring his uncle to refuse him. Kabushi moaned dramatically, Ma, that's no way to ask a favor. Little Kakashi was anything but amused. I'm the Hatake heir. I have the right to know, he demanded. And honestly, his uncle should be pleased to teach him, because they had to pass techniques along if they wanted what was left of the Hatake clan to grow stronger. The older Hatake, however, only shook his head. How about you finish out the little quirks of your own jutsu first before learning something new? Kakashi froze at his words. How did you know that? He hissed. No one was supposed to know he was working on his own jutsu because he hadn't told anyone yet. Ma, I'm not that ignorant of what my sweet little nephew is up to. Kabushi drawled idly. When you disappear off several hours on your own and come home exhausted, I can guess. Also the fact that Kabushi lived through little Kakashi's life already helped reinforce his deduction. I could just as likely been training, Kakashi refuted, though not a complete dismissal of Kabushi's words. Kabushi nodded mildly, and explained, because he knew that was what the teen was waiting for. I also know you have lightning affinity, and those burn marks on your hands you come home with are from applying too much chakra. Knowing the little genius you are, I can assume you are either learning a new jutsu or creating one yourself. You only confirmed my guess. Kakashi looked displeased at the fact he'd given himself away, but played it off with a common scowl. Then he pushed quickly on, what does this have to do with you not teaching me? I can do both at once. Other than the fact that it was one of the same jutsu he was trying to invent himself, Kabushi gave an ironical snort to himself. It was obvious he couldn't say that to his younger self, though, so he switched tracks. Why do you want to learn it? He asked instead, as if he was actually considering the possibility. If anything, that would get the teen to talk, lured by the chance of obtaining a new jutsu if he contributed in the conversation. Kakashi's answer was prompt. To get stronger, he said, and Kabushi could hear the of course to the end. For what? An eyebrow arched at his follow-up question. What do you mean for what? Of course it's for my duty as a shinobi of Konoha, he stated without hesitation. The time traveler tried not to groan into his hands even though he knew that answer was coming. Instead, he shook his head in mild disappointment. If that's your final answer, you'll never get anywhere. Kabushi held up a hand to stall the boy when it looked like he was about to argue. You'll never grow stronger thinking you're only doing something for duty or orders. Don't you have people you love and want to protect? Your precious people? Love is weak. The shinobi rules demand that ninjas should have no emotions ties pulling them down. We are tools to be used, Kakashi recited, nothing like the kid whose life was forever changed by Obito's words and final act. Kabushi hated the morals he lived by before Obito's intervention. The rules be damned. Kabushi snapped. Wanting to protect someone only makes you stronger. Naruto could preach for hours on the topic, probably had on many of their once enemies. But as much as Kabushi wanted to drag the kid here to do the job for him, he knew it wouldn't work on his younger self because Kakashi would never take a shinobi like Naruto seriously. Naruto reminded the teen too similarly to Obito for Kakashi not dismiss his words on principle. The older man let out a sigh. He was the only one who could expand his younger self's tunneled mindset. Come, sit. He patted the grass beside him. Oh, come on, the man urged, when Kakashi made no motion to comply. Can't you at least pretend to be adorable and obedient once in a while? Kakashi narrowed his eyes at the man's order. He stood quiet and contemplative, as if trying to deduce the man's motives. He was clueless but curious, and he supposed sitting by his uncle would do him no harm. So after looking around to make sure no one was watching, Kakashi finally obliged. What now? He demanded impatiently as he plopped down on the ground. Now I tell you a story. Kakashi's limbs twitched warily at his words. The boy made to jump back up and leave, but gloved hands wrapped around his wrists to halt him. Don't be like that, his uncle chided in a decidedly sulky tone. It's a good story. Kakashi stiffened. Not porn, Kabushi corrected quickly, picking up his younger self's dread. The little Chunin's shoulders untensed ever so slightly. Turning to face the man, he seemed to try and confirm the authenticity of his promise before finally accepting at last. All right, fine, he growled slowly, and slipped back into a sitting position. Tell it then. Kabushi sent him a soft smile. His lone eye drifted upwards, gazing into the clouds overhead, unfocused and remembering. A grimace expressed the man's pain upon recalling those memories, but he quickly shook it off, returning his sights on his nephew once more. It's a story about a boy, Kabushi began, words slow and unassuming, and how he strove to be a respected ninja by doing whatever was expected of him. Good for him, Kakashi retorted, thinking nothing of it. Kabushi's eyes closed, and he shook his head. Not good, the older Hotake disagreed, tone deceptively light. He was a coward, hiding behind the word of rules. His pale fingers picked at the phrase of his gloves, but otherwise there was no sign the story held any impact to the man telling it. The truth was he was simply afraid to think for himself, and did what he was told without question. Certain words were a trigger to Kakashi. Kabushi knew this. The word coward was certainly one because that was what Tsukumo had been lab-led as, from the villagers, from fellow shinobi, from Kakashi himself. Kakashi hissed at his uncle slandering the shinobi-taught rules. Shinobi have no authority to question our orders from superiors. We listen and obey. Cowards are the ones who try to break orders for their own purpose. Oh? Kabushi murmured, disappointment in his voice. His eye fixed a steady stare onto his younger selves, as if pulling understanding into the teen from his gaze alone. But at the end of the day, we are human, not some emotionless robotic tool. We think and have opinions because that's what humans do. Kabushi said persuasively, he was a coward because he was afraid how people would react to him if he wasn't obedient. That perfect little shinobi. He was afraid he would see disappointment from them, rejection, scorn, and so he killed off his personality and hid himself behind flawed rules so it wouldn't happen to him. Like it had happened to their father, Kabushi did not say out loud. Kakashi wanted to argue, his mouth open to refute those statements, but he couldn't do it. There was something in his soul that churned at Kabushi's words, that couldn't deny a single point. Another part of him was slowly building in anger, because this sounded too little like a random story than Kabushi admonishing Kakashi about his current life choices. Only a fool couldn't see the resemblance of Kakashi's life to the tale Kabushi was weaving. Kabushi watched him from the corner of his eye, continuing, and then the boy met someone so unlike him, he couldn't help but hate him for it. It was a long time later that the boy finally realized it was jealousy he felt. In front of the judgmental eyes of others, that other boy was constantly criticized. Yet it never bothered the other boy, and he was endlessly cheerful despite that. He was jealous of that mental strength. Kabushi rubbed the leaf symbol of his slanted hitate, his hand slowly gliding towards his left eye. The boy could delude himself all he wanted that they had a mutual hatred of each other, so that he could act out his petty anger. But that was just a lie the boy held onto by himself because when it truly counted, despite how insolent, arrogant, and egotistical the boy, Kabushi said hastily, correcting himself, but Kakashi caught the change in pronoun. The teen's rising anger began to numb. Despite himself, he finally allowed his uncle's words to seep into this conscious, because this wasn't a critic or a random story, but his uncle's own childhood. Kakashi was understandably interested. Despite how insolent the boy was, Kabushi continued over Kakashi's thoughts. That other kid had no hesitation pushing him away from death and accepting it in his place. A lone gray-blue eye stared out into the trees, seeing what no one else could. It's really a shame, he all but whispered, when the moment he finally accepted someone for who they were, finally forgave himself, finally saw the whole world past that bricked wall he built himself, the one he owed it all to was snatched away from this world, never realizing how much the boy owed him. Kakashi fidgeted, gaze never meeting his uncle's eyes. Is this about your eye again? He asked indifferently. Kabushi gave a wiry smile, making out the uncomfortable twinge in his younger self's voice. His story definitely struck something in the teen, maybe. In a stiff motion, Kakashi stood up. His actions were nonchalant as he brushed off grass from his pants. His head tilted to the side arrogantly, but eyes carefully locked onto a tree behind his uncle, refusing eye contact. What does this have to do with anything? He asked, scalding, tone scarcely matching his action. Kabushi knew better than to call him on it. Nothing and everything, he replied instead. Kabushi pulled himself up to his feet as well, back stretching as he stood. He offered the Chunin a tentative smile. Strength is not something you can obtain alone. Get along well with your friends before you regret the decision in the future. I don't have friends. The older Hokage arched an eyebrow. Minato, Rin, Obito? He listed. And there would be so many more if he only gave them a chance. Minato-sensei is the team leader, Rin is a tolerable teammate, and Obito is a weak idiot, the boy stated without any inflection in this tone. They are not my friends. Do not talk as though you know me, Kakashi spat out, turning swiftly on his heel and leaving the man without another word. His stoic, uncaring demeanor was back once more, and Kabushi was afraid he might have pushed too hard. The man, alone, sighed softly to himself. At least he still had time. Little Kakashi hated it when adults preached at him, thinking they knew best. In reality it was false. If adults truly knew what was best, his father would not have been disgraced because his father would have been right. It was a lesson Kakashi learned early on in life, and perhaps the most critical lesson he would ever attain. Everything about the world were lies except for rules. Rules didn't change. They were etched permanently into scrolls and manual, easily understood, easily referenced. There were no way around these cold, hard rules. They were nothing like the whimsical personality that made up the people of the village. People were pathetic and unreliable, changing opinions whenever it suited them best. One minute everyone was happy Sakumo saved them, the next, they scorned him for sacrificing the mission and disgracing the village. What gave adults the right to preach when adults themselves were indecisive sheep, following the opinion of the majority? He would never be like them. Never. He would rather give up those useless emotions and become the model ninja. What was the reason for striving along this career path if he refused to comply with the requirements that lead him towards the ideal? That didn't make him a coward. Kakashi sat up on the rooftop of a stray apartment. He'd ended up wandering aimlessly after storming away from his uncle until he ended up here. Hours passed, clouds upon clouds passing overhead. His eyes were glazed and unseeing as he stared into the sky, mind kept blank. He was unwilling to think, unwilling to see how much sense his uncle honestly made. Why did the man have to come now of all times? Kakashi had been doing fine all on his own. He set his mind to his goal and was striving towards it. Now Kabushi was making him question all his decision, and Kakashi wasn't liking what he saw. In the corner of Kakashi's mind, he faintly registered the sun slowly sinking into the west horizon. The team let out a low sigh. Then, without another word, Kakashi stood up suddenly. He turned around stiffly, as though hating his next movements, yet slowly but surely, he headed back in the direction of the forest where his uncle had been. Half of him had no idea why he was going back. The other half denied furiously that it was because his uncle seemed to be able to help him. Maybe he just wanted some company after spending half the day all by himself. Or maybe just maybe he wanted to listen to his wisdom and learn to trust his uncle and his intrusive opinions. He hadn't made it back to the clearing when shouting caught the Chunin's attention. Keep it up, put more chakra into it. Kabushi's voice sounded, encouraging and pleased. Curious, Kakashi took to the trees to propel himself closer. He didn't know why what he saw made his chest sting so hard. Obito stood before Kabushi as the man eagerly coached the teen on his katon. There was a large grin on Obito's face. There was an even larger grin on Kabushi's, his hand clenched into a fist without him knowing and his lips let out an unexpected hiss of anger. That sound was more than enough to catch Kabushi's attention, drawing the man's gaze over at him. Kakashi muttered quietly to himself, shocked he was caught staring so quickly, as he fled the scene without a glance back. If Kabushi hadn't seen his masked lips moved, he would have assumed he was just imagining things, as a murmur sailed with the wind. So you'd rather help Obito than me? Because Kakashi hadn't forgotten how Kabushi had brushed him off when he asked to learn from him. Yet here Obito was happily taking his spot, when he wasn't even family like him. Though by the time the sentence registered in Kabushi's mind, Kakashi was gone in a swirl of leaves, leaving no traces behind. Little Kakashi had already turned into bed by the time Kabushi returned back at their apartment. In the morning, he was gone before Kabushi woke up, using his window as an escape route so he wouldn't rouse his uncle out of slumber. Kabushi let out an irritated groan, scrubbing his hands on his face when he realized he was all alone. He screwed up, and now Kakashi was no doubt ignoring him. The man ran an irritated hand through his unruly silver hair, wondering how he could fix the situation now. Just when he was getting so close to, fists pounded at the door at that moment. Sensei, wake up already! Naruto's bright voice cried from the other side. Kabushi pulled up his mask, rolled off his couch, and dragged his feet the short distance over. I'm up, he groaned impolitely as he yanked open the door. He glowered down at his student, too cheerful and loud so early in the morning. Minato-sensei's taking us out for brunch since we have no mission today. He told me to take you along, was Naruto's jovial cry back. That boy was immune to Kabushi's rude behaviors. Shame. Then Naruto's words registered to his mind. Oh? He murmured softly to himself, contemplating the proposal. Maybe spending some time with Minato would give him some ideas to deal with his stubborn younger self. Minato had always knew how to instinctively make others feel safe and welcomed. Alright, let's go, the Hokage agreed. Something nudged him in his mind, trying to remind him of something, but for the life of him, Kabushi had no idea what it was. He was only going to leave his younger self alone for a day so he could calm down. What was he forgetting? Shaking his head, Kabushi cast the thought out of his mind. If it really was important, he would remember it sooner or later. It had been too long since he had a rest day to spend with Minato-sensei, and such matters shouldn't spoil their time together. 5 bowls of pork ramen. Naruto cried out as soon as he plopped down on the bar seat of Ichiraku. Kabushi was more polite, nodding at the only other blonde at the ramen stand with a soft, "Good morning, Minato-san." Minato smiled back at him, waving from his place, chopsticks in his hand. "Good morning, Kabushi. How's your day been?" Warmth spread in the masked man at his former teacher's words. He missed this man, his father figure after Sakumo's death, so much. They hardly ever met up outside of training, and times like these, Kabushi cherished, eager to take in warmth of family his child self had stubbornly missed out on. "Can't say much happened," Kabushi laughed. "I was lying on the couch the whole morning. Sulking." But Minato didn't need to know that. The blonde chuckled with him, before turning to watch Naruto practically inhaling the whole stand, shaking his head in amusement. "Well, do order something to eat, Kabushi," the jounin prompted. "Lunch is on me, as I've told Naruto," who he glanced at the younger blonde once more, already staring on his 4th bowl of ramen. "Seems quite eager to eat all my money away," he teased. Naruto had the decency to blush. "Sorry," Minato laughed in response. "No worries. As long as I don't treat you every day, my wallet will survive." Kabushi snorted a laugh with his sensei, ordering a bowl of miso ramen as the blondes bickered playfully between them. Naruto seemed really happy lately, spending time as close as he could without clinging onto his father. Indeed, there was nothing like family. Not for the first time, Kabushi wondered how his life would have been like if his own father was still alive. He wouldn't be as much of a lost cause as his younger self was now, that was for sure. Watching Naruto laugh and joke with his dad made him crave for his own. Chance and luck really favored Naruto. For himself, not so much. Really, if they had just come back 7 years earlier, he could have tried his luck and attempted to change the man's fate. But then again, if he was going to start thinking selfish thoughts like that, he might as well had wished to have gone back to the beginning of time, eager to save everybody. "Telly? Kabushi?" A voice jarred the daydreaming time traveler. "Kabushi?" Minato's concerned voice called out again. A lone gray-blue eye blinked, breaking out of his daze. Kabushi focused on the blonde before him. "Oh, sorry, did you say something?" he asked in a nonchalant drawl. Kabushi could feel Minato staring intently into his face, and the masked man struggled not to pull on his blank facade in return. If there was anyone who knew what Kakashi's blank faces meant, it was Minato. "I asked how you were getting along with Kakashi lately?" the blonde repeated concernedly. Kabushi shrugged after a long moment of silence. "Good. Could be better," he admitted lamely, because he wasn't about to admit he might have messed up. Minato accepted his answer with a small sincere smile. "That's great to hear," he said, before his lips twisted into a more playful grin. "Though, you really should stop teasing Kakashi so much. I don't think I've seen him this flustered before. You really do know how to push his buttons, don't you?" "I guess it's a Hokage talent," the masked man bantered, matching his tone. Kabushi could hear Naruto snorting into his food. "Ah? That explains a lot," the older blonde laughed out loud. "Oh, that boy hasn't been this expressive since the man's mood suddenly dropped, words faltering off into nothing." Kabushi knew what he was going to say. Since Sakumo had been disgraced and committed seppuku in shame, nights after nights, his father's decision had haunted him, before the boy finally had enough and decided to push everything away. That was the start of it all. Kabushi grinned suddenly, a smile forcefully plastered on his face. It did nothing to erase the gloomy memories, but it was certainly a start to shift the atmosphere into something a bit more lively. "Enough about me. How's your life with this hyperactive knucklehead?" he asked. "You've been housing him since we've arrived, haven't you?" "Yes," Minato confirmed. "Beside him, sensei." Naruto whined, mouth full of ramen. "I thought you stopped calling me that." Kabushi gave a low chuckle at the boy's words. "AAA, you'll always be my #1 unpredictable knucklehead ninja," the man cooed. Minato laughed between the sulking Naruto and teasing Kabushi, sounding so light and sunny. "You have quite the moniker, Naruto," the man commented, cerulean eyes lighting up in humor. "I'm not a knucklehead anymore," the younger blonde protested stubbornly. "Of course not," Kabushi comforted, though even Naruto could tell he didn't mean it at all. "Hey! Minato-sensei, tell him he's wrong," the boy pouted, pleading the other blonde for support. The man grinned, tapping his chopsticks against his lips in a mischievous manner. Kabushi couldn't help but notice the blinding resemblance between father and son at Minato's impish expression. He expertly shoved away his own selfish wants and needs as he noticed Naruto's utter glee from interacting with his father. If they had arrived 7 years earlier, perhaps Kabushi could have saved his own father, but Naruto wouldn't have been able to mingle with Minato the way he did now. 7 years ago, Minato was too young and immature, not even close to the Hokage and father figure that Naruto was told stories of. Perhaps, regardless, Naruto wouldn't have been disappointed, but Kabushi was just glad the kid was able to have the full experience because he deserved it. Naruto brooded into his ramen, seeing the mischievousness on his father's face. Hey, you don't get to tease me too, he grumbled, before quickly, easily turning the tables, or else I get to tell Kabushi-sensei that you calling us out for ramen is so that you might lure a certain redhead to join us if she passes by. Minato seemed to choke at Naoe's words, and Kabushi's single eye gleamed at the information. Oh, do tell, Kabushi urged his student, gray-blue eyes twinkling conspiringly. There was no ulterior motive, the blonde jounin denied, trying futilely to wave the suspicions away. Naoe gave a toothy grin, whisker marks on his face stretching as his lips split widely upwards. So I saw these pictures of a redhead he had hidden, like, everywhere in his house, the boy began, speaking to Kabushi, even as Minato protested weakly beside him. I asked him about her, but all Minato-sensei would tell me was how much she likes ramen and how he hasn't seen her in a while. And then the next thing I know, he's suggesting that we should go try Chiraku's ramen today with this perverted look in his eyes. There was no perverted look, Minato objected, face heating up. I was genuinely curious if you too wanted ramen. Naruto rolled his eyes with a laugh. Sure, he drawled, I've had my fair share of perverted teachers, Kabushi-sensei included. I can tell. So tell me about your beloved red-headed princess, Kabushi grinned, tag-teaming with Naruto to embarrass his former teacher. And just exactly how many photos do you have of her hidden throughout your house? There's only a few, the blonde admitted, because it was fruitless to deny anything by this point. Naoe giggled on the stool, his dangling feet kicking in excitement. No, there's not, he challenged. You're taking stalker photos of your crush? No! Minato balked, face burning red by now. He sent a glare at the silver-haired man. They're legit photographs, he tried to explain. Ah, Kabushi said knowingly, photographs you say? As in more than one picture of your lady love? The jounin moaned into his hand, because the two of them looked like they were having too much fun to let him off any time soon. It's just Kushina, Minato grumbled pitifully, sending a playful glare at his houseguest for starting the whole thing. What's just me? A feminine voice suddenly asked from behind, curious. Minato stiffened slightly at it, but seemed to recover quickly enough. How are you today, Kushina? The man asked, like nothing was out of the ordinary. Or like how they weren't just discussing he had a stash of her photos framed around his house. What are you doing here? He continued, sounding a tad strained. Kushina's only reaction to his tone was to take a quick glance over at him, then, oh, I'm fine, the female answered, and then, what? Am I not allowed to eat ramen now? She pointed at the ramen bar they were sat in. Minato gave an awkward laugh. Kushina ignored him. Her long, red hair swung behind her back as she turned towards the two guests beside the man. Are these two the new ninjas who showed up a few months ago? The redhead asked. Introduce us already? She urged impatiently to Minato. I'm Uzumaki Kushina. Kushina called over before Minato could even speak. Kabushi stifled that laugh at Kushina, remember her personality vividly. Kushina was someone you could never forget. People could try and order the woman around, but she did whatever she wanted, and if there was a complaint, she would bulldoze right through it. The silver-haired man raised a hand in greeting. Hatake Kabushi, he said pleasantly. Pleased to meet you. Naruto was stuck in a daze, eyes focused solely on the redhead before him and mind out of orbit. His sky-blue eyes had a shiny sheen to them, emotions trapped within. They screamed out his desire for his mother to recognize him, hold him, love him, and comfort him, everything he wanted to say as a child but was never allowed or been able to. Kabushi stuck his foot behind Minato's stool, and almost regrettably, jolted his students wordless admiring. There was only so long before the look on Naruto's face raised suspicion. Stop ogling at the poor woman, Kabushi demanded. The boy snapped out of his stupor with a soft "oh." Shaking his head, the blonde started again, this time in the boisterous tone Kabushi was used to. I'm Naoe. Nice to meet you, he cried back at the redhead. You're louder than I expected you to be, he commented, fond, oh so fondly, innocent, and of course, blunt like the ninja Naoe was. Kabushi choked back a laugh at the blonde's words. Kushina and Naruto were two peas in a pod. Definitely mother and son with the same loudness, bluntness, and hyperactive impatience. What did you say, you little brat? The woman yelled, her dark blue eyes flashing with rage. Minato laughed nervously, hands held up in a placating manner. Now, let's not fight, he soothed the two. The blonde turned to Kabushi for help only to see the masked man sitting back and enjoying the confrontation in amusement. Minato sighed. Play nice, children. Children? You calling me a child, Minato? Kushina sulked, turning her attention away from other blonde. Of course not, he calmed, holding his hand defensively. I would never suggest that. You're a perfectly fine example of a woman. Good, the redhead huffed, plopping down on a free stool. Now be a gentleman and buy this perfectly fine and beautiful example of a woman a bowl of ramen. Minato chuckled softly at the redhead's words, completely expecting it. My treat, he said charmingly. Naoe snorted indiscreetly into his hands at the Namake's tone, earning himself a glare. Your girlfriend's got you whipped, Naoe teased, quiet of course, because he didn't want to earn Kushina's wrath. She's not, Minato started, before he cut himself off. He turned away in what was likely a huff, and then was distracted by the woman's further demands. Excellent, Kushina grinned at him. Salt ramen, Tuchi-san! The woman cried over the counter, coming right up. Kushina rubbed her hands eagerly, turning back to the two time travelers in enthusiastic curiosity. So, how's the idiot been treating you too? She asked good-naturedly. She tactfully ignored the playful scowl the man sent back at her, blinding him with another cheery grin. He's been getting along wonderfully with my idiot. You know what they say, Kabushi offered, eyes lit in a rather mischievous expression. Idiots attract each other? Kushina finished happily. Hey, the silver-haired man and redhead expertly ignored the indignant twin cries. That works just as well, Uzumaki-san, Kabushi concurred. The woman cracked up before giving the Hatake a TSK. Called me Kushina, the redhead corrected cheerfully. No Yazumaki-san. That's too formal. Of course, Kushina-san, Kabushi agreed obediently towards the woman who'd be everything from his older sister to mother figure in the past. Kushina grinned happily, turning sharply towards Minato. See how nice some guys are? What? Minato asked innocently. Aren't I buying you lunch already? You're supposed to buy her flowers, Naruto whispered knowingly from the side. And expensive jewelry. The boy paused. At least that's what Ino tells me. Kushina laughed, slurping into her noodles with vigor. Take your time, Kushina. Minato scolded like he would with a child. You don't want to start feeling nauseated again. Hey, I'm chewing properly. I always do. The woman countered before waving off the man with a, that was just last week's. I'm feeling fine now, honestly. To get him to stop worrying like the worrywart he was. Stop embarrassing me. Yeah, don't be mean. Naoe agreed with a laugh. Kushina turned back to the younger blonde, a laugh equally as strong on her lips. Yeah. She cried with a nod before finishing up her noodles. I like you guys already, she said happily, patting Naoe on the back. We should get together someday when we're all free. Kushina pushed aside her now empty bowl aside as she hopped out of her seat. Kabushi could see the disappointment clearly in Naruto's blue eyes as the redhead looked ready to leave. Oh, you're going already? The blonde asked. There was a soft, pleading whine hidden in this tone. Sorry, the redhead said remorsefully, but we have to get to the Hokage Tower. Minato blinked at that. Eh? We? Me too? He jumped up from his stool at Kushina's nod. Why didn't you tell me sooner? The woman pouted, but how can I resist ramen? It's your fault for tempting me. We could have come back another time, but I was already here. Kushina whined, all this walking around to find you was making me tired, and I suddenly craved ramen. Don't you always? Minato retorted, before shaking his head. Alright, my fault. Let's head to tower now, he urged exasperatedly, already laying down bills on the counter. He turned towards the two time travelers. Sorry to cut our lunch short, he said. Kabushi nodded, his own disappointment matching the sulking look on Naruto's face, but he didn't show it, as he understood the busy life of a shinobi. Thanks for lunch, Kabushi replied, holding up a hand in a saluting goodbye. See the two of you on time tomorrow for your mission, Minato reminded them. We're meeting at the Hokage Tower, 7 sharp. He fixed a stare at the lounging silver-haired man in front of him. Kabushi returned an innocent smile that was tainted with amusement. Are you telling me I shouldn't stop to help old ladies across the road? The blonde rolled his eyes. If that's what you actually do, he grumbled mildly before allowing a grin to form back on his face. Anyways, see you tomorrow, he called out, bidding them goodbye. And with that, he fled after his lovely redhead, shooting her a I told you not to eat so fast, as she complained something about her stomach hurting or feeling sick. Kabushi chuckled as they watched Minato's quickly retreating back. She is so his girlfriend, Naruto laughed to himself. Kabushi snorted. I would expect so considering they eventually had you. Naruto froze and then blinked thoughtfully to himself. Oh, he muttered, yeah, I guess so. Then he snickered, but he's too shy to admit it, because Minato still refused to openly admit it despite how many times Naruto pressed both at his house and the ramen bar. It's going to be hilarious making fun of him, he conspired to himself. Kabushi laughed at his student, ruffling up Naoe's blonde hair, and shaking his head exasperatedly. Have fun with that, he said and meant it. Then with a wave, the masked man gave Naoe a final nod and headed back to Kakashi's apartment in great spirits. Today was a good day. The moment Kabushi set foot in his old apartment, the nagging in his mind persisted once more. The silver-haired man scrubbed his hand across his face with a slight groan. Maybe I'm just worried about Kakashi, he mused quietly to himself. It had practically been a whole day since Kabushi last saw his younger self. After all, Kabushi dropped himself down on the couch he claimed as his own. He cast his mind back to his own days as a teen. If he had been the old Kakashi, and an unknown uncle spontaneously appeared in his life, constantly attempting to get a rise out of him, how would he feel? Annoyed, definitely, but then again, that was the default state of young Kakashi. He would be cautious, trying to find deeper meaning into everything this unknown uncle said and did. He would be flustered, because no one acted that way around him that hadn't been discouraged from by his snark. He would be pretentious, unwilling to let this stranger see anything except the image he wanted to project to the world. Perhaps even absent-minded from time to time, because Kabushi's similarity to Sakumo drew nightmares that persisted constantly. However, avoidance was unexpected. Kakashi would sooner lash out at someone, bullheadedly driving his own views to those who opposed. His attitude towards Obito was one example of this. Avoidance meant. Kabushi blinked in wonder, sitting up from the slouch he had slipped into. Avoidance meant Kabushi had gotten through Kakashi's thick, stubborn skull. Kabushi had somehow managed to hit the right topics and gotten Kakashi to look introspectively at himself. It was surprising because Kabushi knew adults nagging tended to make his younger self close off his ears and make agreeing noises until they went away. That's why, though he tried, he hadn't put too much hope into it. Even if Kakashi only heard a single sentence of his tale and kept it to heart, Kabushi was already pleased. But who would expect his words had hit deeper than Kabushi expected? Avoidance also meant Kakashi cared about Kabushi, about that stranger of an uncle that suddenly appeared into his life. Admittedly, Kakashi's departure from the forest once he saw Obito with him wasn't most ideal, but if the avoidance was from jealousy, that meant there was something to feel jealous about, and Kabushi hadn't realized he was already starting to hold a place in his younger self's heart. While Kabushi was inwardly feeling satisfied with himself, the handle of the apartment door suddenly jiggled, and the door slowly creaked open. Kabushi's eyes darted over to the sound. Speak of the devil, Kabushi thought to himself, and then his mind gave way to bewilderment as Kakashi's appearance registered to his mind. Little Kakashi was covered in bruises, from black to purple. White bandages peeked from the edge of his sleeves. As the teen walked stiffly towards the couch Kabushi vacated for him. What happened? Kabushi began, and then the persistent nudging in his mind finally gave its reason. The Jounin exam, Kakashi realized, quickly connecting the dots. I miss your Jounin exam, Kabushi exclaimed aloud, before pausing because, wait, that couldn't be right. If today really was Kakashi's Jounin exam, then they wouldn't be meeting at the Hokage Tower tomorrow morning, rather it would be at their usual training grounds. This wasn't what happened the first time around. Kakashi's gray-blue eyes narrowed, but there was no feeling behind it. Are you spying on me? He stated. How else did the man know he just took the Jounin exam? Or was even scheduled to take it? I wish I was, and then I wouldn't have missed it, Kabushi said, half teasing the boy, even while his mind was in turmoil. Did he unknowingly change the future without even trying? He would like to brush it off as a minor change, except for Kabushi. Nothing about tomorrow was any bit minor. Tomorrow was the start of the mission that took a young teen from the world too soon to be fair. Except, now what? Had Obito's death been effortlessly postponed? Clueless, in front of him, Kakashi rolled his eyes. I'm not a kid. I don't need an audience. I already threatened Sensei not to come. Besides, only Jounin are allowed to watch. You clearly are not a Jounin of Konoha. Kabushi brushed him off with a wave of his hand. Whether you're 13 or 50, I'll always want to watch my precious nephew compete. Nothing would have gotten in my way to cheer you on, he said, words truthful, yet mind distant. Something fluttered in Kakashi's chest, but a sudden pain shot it down not a moment later. Well, you clearly forgot, so it's nothing more than meaningless words now. You seem more interested in helping train Obito than me anyways, he commented coolly, shifting to a more comfortable position on the couch. Kabushi grimaced at the teen's pointed words, but merely stood to head to the kitchen. He wouldn't apologize for it because Obito needed his help. Kakashi had to realize his own teammates improving was advantageous to him as well, also Obito. Since Kabushi somehow managed to divert Team 7 away from the dreaded Canopy Bridge mission, Obito would no longer be the catalyst to Kakashi's change in worldview. This was solely Kabushi's duty now. Kabushi exited the kitchen, hand-holding plates of reheated dinner. He passed one off to Kakashi before settling down across from him, a plate in his own lap. Eat, the man ordered, and pulled down his mask and dug a chopstick into his own plate. Kakashi openly studied to older Hatake. The two of them looked remarkably alike, Kakashi noted, seeing his uncle's slim jawline. People had always mentioned the similarities between himself and Tsukumo, but clearly Kabushi and himself looked a lot more alike. His eyes wandered to the man's slanted Hittite. A hint of a scar was seen, usually hidden by the edge of his mask. The scar looked ragged and deep, even from the little that was present. Kabushi's story about his past, though he tried to pass it off as a random boy, couldn't help but resurface in Kakashi's mind. Lowering his face, Kakashi tugged his own mask off as well and picked up his chopsticks. They were halfway through the meal, when Kabushi had enough of the repetitive noise of chewing. His voice cut through without warning. Let's talk. Kakashi looked up sharply. Kabushi's solemn expression looked evenly back at him, and Kakashi wondered if it was a continuation to Kabushi's tale. The boy swallowed. About what? Kakashi probed. You, me, the boy repeated dry. There is nothing we need to discuss about me, Kakashi continued, quickly and sharply. The topic about himself was not one he wanted to touch. The line would have been said confidently had it been days before, but after Kabushi's own reveal, Kakashi hadn't been able to help to dwell on his own life. It had been a bad idea, to say the least. The time traveler sighed softly, placing his plate of food to the side and staring at Kakashi straight on. That is called running away, Kabushi said. There is always something to discuss, no matter who it is. Kakashi bit his lip anxiously before realizing how visible that action was without his mask on. He turned away. Kabushi shook his head sadly. You don't have to look at me. Just listen, he murmured, hoping Kakashi would do that, at the very least. For a while, the two Hatakis sat still at their respective spots, before at last, the silver-haired boy dipped his head to a short nod. Talk all you want? It doesn't mean I'll accept what you say, the boy said stiffly. Inwardly Kabushi knew that wouldn't be the case. Outwardly Kabushi only gave another soft smile, even though Kakashi wasn't looking his way. Alright, Kabushi said agreeably, taking in a deep breath and casting his own mind inwards to the experiences and emotions he'd once tried so hard to lock away. He didn't know how to start, but bumbling his way through it was better than dawdling in hesitation. At the very least it would show his sincerity. I know you're a great ninja, Kakashi, a prodigy, everyone praises. You have skills beyond those your age, but you have to remember, you are not their age. You're only 13, and despite what you want to believe, you are still a child. And you need to act like it. Or rather, you are allowed to act like it, and no one will blame you. Kabushi paused, unsure how to continue. He licked his lips, stalling for time. Why are you shoving away your emotions when you feel you can't deal with them? Kabushi finally began again, this time straight to the root of the issue. Why do you think there are people around you for? They care about you. They'll be glad to share your pain with you. The haunting, dreary nights after Sakumo's death you are allowed to feel sorrow, to cry your heart out when you need to ask for hugs, to throw a tantrum. To let it all out, Kabushi cried out, because God knows how much he needed it, and how much it would have helped if he had. And yet, but of all those choices, you decided to keep it all locked in and hidden the key away where no one would ever find it. But that box won't last forever. One day, the lid will crack open, and when it explodes out on you, it will break you, all that evil in that box, all those problems you refused to address and just shoved away, and you'll end up doing nothing but suicidal Anbu missions after missions until your body can no longer take it. And yet the pain will never go away. It'll only get worse and worse, Kabushi said softly, remembering, the pain will never go away. Not until you finally realize you need to open up to people in order to heal. People like Obshio, Rin, Minato, the Hokage, Guy, Naruto, Sakura, there are so many people who are willing to help you, if you'd only open your eyes and look. The sharp clang of Kakashi's plates as the young teen violently pushed it away drew Kabushi's attention. Everyone around are just comrades of war. I don't need them, and I don't tolerate them any more than I am required to, the silver-haired boy objected. Kabushi tilted his head, staring into his own memories. You like Obito? Kabushi finally said. We envied him. He became an irreplaceable friend without me knowing it. But your pride won't let you be friends with the dead last. Or rather, have friends at all. But he won't be last forever. Everyone is growing up, and some are just late bloomers, Kakashi snorted. Obito hasn't grown up in the past 3 years. And if anything, his skills have only gotten worse. Kabushi gave the boy a soft smile. Maybe all he needs is a nudge, a guiding hand, and someone who believes in him. A friend. Basically, you're saying that friends make everything better, Kakashi huffed, eyes staring darkly on the plate on his lap. His small hands picked absent-mindedly at his wooden chopsticks. Among other things, the time traveler replied, wondering how much really got through to his younger self this time. The older man rubbed his temples before shaking his head softly and picking up the empty plates in front of them both. I'll clean up, Kabushi offered, pushing up from the couch. Why don't you sleep on it? The man suggested. Besides, you've had a busy day. Beside him, Kakashi pressed his lips into a thin line, eyes with a faraway look, before they flicker and snap to attention again. Right, the boy said, tone seemingly back to normal. Kabushi gestured towards the teen's room. Go sleep, he urged, feeling oddly parental. We have to report to the Hokage Tower first thing tomorrow morning for our mission. He'd meddled enough for one day. Plus, Kabushi needed time to himself to think. He thought for a second that the Canopy Bridge mission was a void, except the longer the idea settled in the back of his mind, the more and more unlikely it suddenly seemed. Perhaps the meeting spot changed, but the mission couldn't have. As a solider, Kabushi knew how vital that mission had been to their attack against the Iwagakure forces. Something so major was unlikely to be altered. And it was supposed to be a relatively simple mission because of the shinobi teams scattered across the country to divert Iwa's focus, something even a recently promoted jounin could command. Kakashi fit the bill perfectly, both in the past and present. So the mission would commence, and the bridge would fall, but hopefully this time no stray cave would take Obito along with it. And if such coincidences still occurred, did fate honestly think Kabushi would let the past reenact itself in front of his very eyes and not intervene? Kakashi's sudden frown caught Kabushi off guard as the boy halted his step back to his room. His words threw Kabushi for a loop. We're meeting at the training area, not the Hokage Tower. The pores of every cell in Kabushi's body froze. I guess the original Team Minato and the two of you have different missions tomorrow, Kakashi commented, voicing what had already occurred through Kabushi's suddenly frantic mind. Dread filled Kabushi. Even as he feared the question itself, Kabushi forced his mouth to move and ask it, voice slow and hesitant. Do you know where your mission is going to be? The boy tilted his head to the side thinking. Somewhere in Kusagakure, Kakashi guessed. Oh, I see. Good night then, Kabushi dismissed. If his voice seemed a little stiff, Kakashi never noticed, as the young boy slipped off for his bed. Inwardly, the time traveler was panicking because he knew little Kakashi's mission was the exact mission he had dreaded for years and years after. And if that was the case, then where would his own be held? Just when he thought he was given a second chance, it was quickly snatched away from him. A bitter laugh surfaced, because didn't it seem like even fate was against his recuse of his late best friend? Except, Kabushi couldn't allow it. He couldn't just give up like that. Kabushi slipped out of Kakashi's apartment without a second thought, heading towards their Hokage, frustration and pain fueling the way. He stepped into the old man's office the moment he was allowed in, his eyes set and determined. "Can I help you, Kabushi?" the Sandaime asked, pipe bobbing in his mouth. His office was still brightly lit, despite the time of night. The work of a Hokage was never done. The mission tomorrow, the Hatake began without much preamble, almost feeling sorry of disturbing the Hokage's work, but not enough for Obito's life. Is it not the same as the one Team Minato will be given? A deep gaze caught his eye, giving nothing away. Does it matter? The old man asked ambiguously. Still, Kabushi understood it as a no all the same. Kabushi never took himself one for impulsive actions. Perhaps Naruto would argue against it, citing his decision to investigate that rock that brought them here in the past in the first place. But the truth of that was that Kabushi had weighed the pros and cons between leaving it or risking the possibility. Madara was well aware of the rock and its unknown capabilities. And he'd conferred with the Godame after giving a full report, before dragging Naruto into the mess. Tsunade-sama had had her Anbu ready should things get out of hand with the rock, but he just never planned for it to throw them out of the current timeline. Yet at this moment, with the sight of Obito's crushed face lingering in his left eye for 15 years, emotions burst out of his chest. "I insist on joining Team Minato," Kabushi pleaded, voice filled with unadulterated need and fear. "And why must you?" Hiruzen only said, "So calm, too calm." Kabushi opened his mouth, but no words filtered through. "Because Obito will die," was not the right answer. "Because the kids are too young. Because Kakashi isn't ready to lead yet. Because I'm part of Team Minato," he said, though none ringing true because Obito was his only concern this time. But his expression was begging in full distress, and though his reasons were fake, his passion was not. The Hokage sat motionless through his barefaced lies. His eyes were hard and calculating, studying the bearing of the shinobi before him. The old man closed his eyes suddenly, as if in deep thought. And then, he said one word Kabushi knew would haunt him forever: denied. Kabushi's whole body felt numb. The Hokage clasped his hands in front of him on his desk. His eyes were sharp and narrowed as he glanced between the three ninjas in front of him. The taller of the two blondes before him bowed deeply. "Understood, Hokage-sama," the man stated. "Team Minato will depart for Kusa immediately." The Hokage turned his attention to the silver-haired man beside the tall blonde. Hiruzen could see the man's stiff posture and twitching fingers as though he was tempted to clench them tightly into a fist. Kabushi was good, Hiruzen noted. Not many could hide their feeling, especially such desperate ones, as he'd seen last night, so well. His skills only made the Hokage more suspicious of the two. For who knows what else they were hiding from him. And why was he so desperate to follow Team Minato's mission? "Kabushi?" "Understood." Kabushi spoke blandly, voice giving nothing away. "Narwe and I will head towards the border of Uno Kuni to assist the troops stationed there. And try to avoid acknowledging that they were being placed as far away from Kusa as possible." The old man gave a nod. "It is important," Hiruzen stated unnecessarily, "for you to provide distraction to divert Iwa's attention away from Team Minato's group. You are a key role in our strategy," he said. Kabushi could plainly hear the message under his statement. The Hokage was making sure he knew how much they were being trusted, being placed in such a pivotal part of their plans. In other words, the Hokage wanted him to prove to him they were worthy of his trust and not disappoint him. But for once, Kabushi, no, Kakashi, could have cared less. Kakashi could go through the motions. He could follow orders without fail for his village. He knew the importance of his role, but his heart ached so badly in his chest. Kakashi had worried about changing too much of the future when they were first dropped into the past. He was afraid of erasing the timeline he and Narwe were plucked out from. He'd convinced himself that they were allowed some minor changes, because surely changing little Kakashi's attitude early or coincidentally saving an overlooked Uchiha couldn't do too much damage. But then fate decided it wasn't to be, and Kakashi wondered if it was the world's way of telling him no. Then what was the point of shipping him into the past, other than making him relive the inevitable pain and suffering? Naruto knew him long enough to realize something was wrong with his sensei, as the blonde continued to flicker concerned gazes over at him. Kabushi wished Minato could see what he was thinking. He wanted some guidance. Should he or should he not ignore all signs of the universe that was pushing for a linear timeline? Obito would die if they didn't let him go with them, or somehow warn Team Kakashi. But was he supposed to scream out to the world he was from the future now? There was nothing discreet he could do to change Obito's doom. Then what though? Then he might be disregarded as crazy or insane. He might be thrown into jail for trying to disrupt such an important mission. He might be believed, but not in time because the mission couldn't be postponed. Besides, how could anyone believe or even begin to imagine that fanatical tale of time travel? "Dismissed," said the Hokage over Kabushi's internal turmoil. Minato turned on his heel, breaking Kakashi's heart with every step he took, as he left towards the door without a look back. Sensei? Naoe whispered with a nudge of his elbow. Kabushi nodded, eyes seeing nothing as he headed out the Hokage tower. Come along, Naoe, he said, voice flat and dead. Maybe he shouldn't make his student worry for him, and just accept the fact Obito would be gone, like he had for the past 30 years. But pretending was too hard at the moment, especially after the small glimmer of hope he'd held in his heart since day one of their time-traveling adventure was snatched away so viciously. He never should have hoped. Reaching you was not a tiring task. But every step killed the silver-haired man a little more. Every step he took towards the opposite side of what would once more be Obishio's deathbed was like a drawn-out suicide. Small, deliberate stabs to the heart. Naoe ran silently beside Kabushi. His cerulean eyes bore intently on him. Around them, Chunins and a few Jounin accompanied their journey, undoubtedly the other backup troops. Kabushi knew Naoe wanted to talk, but the boy had enough sense not to do so with everyone around. Had they been alone, Kabushi knew Naoe would have said something, anything, seeing his sensei like this. Naoe knew him too well to not spot his silent depression, and it was hard to hide his grief from something he regretted every day of his life for the past 30 years. Kabushi didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse to be spared the need to talk about it. And if he could, he would ignore those inquiring eyes of Naruto's as long as he possibly could. Because sometimes, shoving things to the corner of his mind was the only way he knew he could live on without breaking down in the process. And fine, call him hypocritical, despite all he told little Kakashi. But this was the way he had lived for the past 20 years. Sometimes old habits were hard to change. Perhaps he had more hope for his younger self than he did for himself. All right, men, a Jounin called out as soon as the group made it to their location. We're spreading out from here onwards. Team Kizeo, you're heading towards the camp furthest north. Team Jokin to the east. Team Kabushi. Yes, Kabushi acknowledged. You are heading deeper in. My team with me. Report to your individual captain when you make it to your spot. Understood? As the shinobis all leaped towards their assigned directions, Kabushi tried to push a stern, blank face back on as he sped towards their squad captain. The silver-haired man feigned focused determination, eyes fixed solely on their target location. It was not until Kabushi and Naoe met their captain and were assigned to their positions when Naoe cornered his teacher. The boy's eyes flared with stubborn annoyance. The two were alone in a rocky trench. Having been ordered to watch over that area, the silver-haired man could not turn away and leave when the boy started asking questions. Kakashi-sensei, Naoe demanded stubbornly, voice conveying his utter persistence. What's the matter? Kabushi, the man stressed the name, fixing a look at the boy. The blonde huffed, whatever. What's wrong? Kabushi shook his head, eyes scanning the area. Nothing, Naoe. Just stay alert. No. The defiant bluntness surprised the man, and he couldn't help snapping his head over to the boy. No, Naoe repeated seriously. Not until you tell me what's wrong. We have our orders and we will listen to them, Kabushi retorted strictly. His voice left no room for arguments, but since when did Naruto care about such things? I don't care, Naoe humphed. Something's been bothering you since this morning. Stop acting like your younger self and tell me. We're in this together. There is nothing, the man snapped back. For a second, Naoe stayed quiet, perhaps shocked at his teacher snapping at him. And then the boy's blue eyes narrowed. It's you, he said, confidence building with every word, and you team. Nothing was a sorer subject for his teacher than his old teammates. Nothing else could make Kabushi react like that strongly. Kabushi's silence gave Naruto all the indication he needed to know he was correct. Something's going to happen to them, isn't it? The boy gasped. Kabushi refused to explain. What's going to happen? Sensei, Kabushi tried to keep his voice as controlled as he could as he looked firmly over at his student. Naoe, we are nowhere near them. Team Minato can take care of themselves, but they can't. Not last time, and probably not this time either, and that's why you're so worried, Naoe refuted. His finger dug into his hair, trying to remember all he could about his sensei's past. Dad's not going to die until I'm born, so it's either Rin or Obito, the boy mused frantically to himself. The blonde looked up at Kabushi, face pleading the man to just tell him, even as his mind worked away. Between Rin and Obito, the one who needs your help. Cerulean eyes flashed in a moment of insight, catching a glimpse at Kabushi's covered face. The Sharingan, Naoe whispered. It's Obito. Something clogged his throat as Kabushi attempted to tell Naruto off. Words just refused to emerge, as the boy's phrase echoed involuntarily through his mind. It's Obito. He knew it was Obito. He knew. But he didn't need to hear it. He didn't need confirmation of Obito's unavoidable death. Leave it, Kabushi persisted, voice too devoid of emotion. We have orders to stay here. The sensei I know wouldn't say this. Well, I am saying it now. Naoe let out a low growl at Kabushi's words. Those who don't follow the rules are trash, Naruto quoted heatedly at him. And those who abandon their friends are worse than trash. Kabushi forced his limbs to loosen up, never realizing when he'd clenched his fists, and until the prickling of his nails against coarse gloves hurt too much to ignore. I know, he admitted, voice almost fading in the wind. Kakashi-sensei never abandons his teammates, the boy continued, daring his teacher to say otherwise. I know, Kabushi repeated, in a louder whisper, a sibilant hiss. So why are you giving up on Obito? Naruto demanded. Does he mean so little to you? Of course not, the silver-haired man defended promptly, sharply, before Naruto could even finish suggesting that ridiculous idea. Perhaps the blonde had expected this answer, for he didn't look the slightest put back by his sensei's tone. Then why aren't we saving him? He's your friend, and he's mine too. And you know what's going to happen to him. So why aren't we doing it already? Naruto cried out. Because they couldn't without breaking orders. Because they were already being watched closely. Because they had the knowledge to reduce casualty in the upcoming Fourth Shinobi World War, and while Kakashi really wanted to, could he risk saving one life only to be put on suspicion and be unable to save the many others to come when it actually counted? Was he really that selfish? If you're not going, then I am, Naruto declared. Naruto, Kabushi said in a stern voice, stopping the boy in his tracks. This is my problem, but we have orders we can't break, and Obito's on the other side of the country. I can't do both at once, Kakashi finally explained, because despite his fervent denial, he had given it some thought. Shadow clones, then, Naruto suggested stubbornly. Kabushi shook his head kindly. I've considered it, he murmured through his mask. The sleepless night he spent yesterday was devoted to nothing but running possible scenarios through his mind. I can either make one to leave here, or make one to send to Obito's mission. But I can't account for what will happen if they burst, Kabushi explained, pointing out the holes in the idea. This was not my mission last time around, and I have no knowledge of what happened in this area during this time. Maybe the IWA forces tried to invade from this point. Maybe not, but on the off chance that they did, I don't want to let down our village by not stopping them should my clone burst. Kabushi looked away, continuing, and should it burst over by Obito's mission, how can I save him then? I will be on the other side of the country watching Obito fall again. And he knew if he watched it a second time, this time his heart really would shatter into a million broken pieces. The man's voice lowered into a soft whisper. He looked wearily into his gloved hands, helpless and ashamed. It's a matter of what am I willing to sacrifice? The whole village, the end of a war dash, or the life of one boy? Naruto's clenched fist shook by his sides at his sensei's words. No one! The teen bellowed, eyes flaring in determination. We're not sacrificing anyone. Keep making clones if they burst. Keep sending them over. Kabushi shook his head. I don't have the ability to continuously make clones, he said regretfully. I don't have that much chakra to spare. But I do! Naruto cried, cerulean eyes widening in anticipation. But I'm not you. Then I'll do it. No, Kabushi rejected even before the blonde could finish saying his sentence. I am not involving you in this, he said harshly. But I'm the only one who can do this, Naruto countered single-mindedly. The masked ninja kept quiet, determined not to give in to his student's tempting offer. Of course he wanted to take it because it was the only option that had a possibility of succeeding. But that wouldn't be fair to Naruto, especially when Kabushi could so vividly predict the possible consequences the action would result in, and he really didn't want that to happen to the cheerful blonde. If Kabushi was the one who took action, Naruto could plead ignorance to it all and get away relatively scot-free. Fine, I'll go myself, Naruto snapped, suddenly enraged by the silence. Naruto, Kabushi barked. The blonde bit his lower lip, face contracting into a miserable grimace. Why? The teen crumbled. Why won't you save Obito? Why won't you let me help? Kabushi closed his eyes, and the grin-splitting face of Naruto's from the day before drifted through his mind. How could he snatch away the warm atmosphere Naruto and Minato had because of his own selfish wants? The plans were flimsy, full of holes and room for errors. It was inevitable one way or another Konoha would catch wind of it and become suspicious of him. If anything went awry, Kakashi wanted to be the only one in trouble. He absolutely couldn't take Naruto's smile away and drag Naruto down with him to suffer under Konoha's distrusting, scorning eyes, Minato's scorning eyes. Do you honestly believe we're left here alone? Someone will come to check on us, Kabushi said instead, in place of his thoughts. They'll see my clone and think I'm still here, Naruto argued. Or I'll send clones to Obito's team instead. But you don't know what will happen to Obito, or where to find him. I'll get my clones to protect yours, the boy suggested hesitantly. Kabushi shook his head. I know how you fight. It's reckless brute force. You're not suitable for stealth protection missions. They would be against trained rock ninjas, and Kakashi knew his clone would have a high chance of dispelling before Kabushi had a chance to save Obito. Nevertheless, Naruto was relentless in his persistence. Then Naruto began again. Then we'll leave clones here. You said there was only a chance they might invade from this point, right, sensei? It'll have a less likely chance of popping here, and we can save Obito. It'll only be a clone. Even were the IWA need not to attack, the captain, or someone, will check up on us. A clone is still only a clone. If anyone looks close enough, they will be able to tell immediately. Can't we take the chance? Kabushi gave his blonde student a grim stare, opting not to voice what the boy already knew. But Naruto wouldn't give in. Please, sensei. Naruto begged. We have to do something. Don't. Kabushi wanted to shout at the boy, even as he outwardly pressed his lips into a firm, stubborn line. The more Naruto begged, the quicker Kabushi's resolution to let Obito go crumbled. But he really shouldn't bring Naruto into this mess. He desperately tried to hold up the crumbling wall, but every time he touched it, the quicker it burst into dust. Kabushi owed Obito so much. Nothing of him truly wanted to leave Obito to die again. His brain knew it, his heart knew it, his soul knew it, and his body knew it, as Kabushi had already been trying so hard not to run off to his teammates' aid without consideration of the consequences. Can't we at least try? Kabushi dimly heard Naruto cry one last time, voice breaking in misery. The blonde's voice ended in an almost whining beg. Anything to save a teammate. Kabushi recalled just how much Naruto had been willing to risk to save Sasuke. Kabushi clenched his gloved fists, hand drifting unconsciously his covered eye where it stung slightly under the Hittite. Was it just him, or was Obito's eye threatening to cry at the idea of being abandoned once again? That crybaby. That fine, Kabushi whispered reluctantly. The blonde's head snapped up in disbelief. I'll take a while to cross the country to hidden grass, Kabushi said instead of answering to Nao's inquisitive gaze. We're going now, before he changed his mind. From the corner of his eye, Kabushi saw a smile of relief slowly flooding Nao's face. A small one wanted to bloom on his own face, even as Kabushi tried to keep it down. But he couldn't help it, because suddenly, it felt like Obito was finally safe, and the icy needles poking his heart were finally detracting their claws. Finally, he could breathe once again. The two of them took off together, leaving a clone of themselves behind. Kabushi ran soundlessly by Nao's side, keeping low to the ground to attract as little attention as possible. Kabushi tried to stay confident, but with each step, he knew the two of them were closer and closer to being exposed. The lengthy journey from their post to hidden grass stretched too extensively for Kabushi's liking. They'd keep to the ground, the trees, behind rocks, every step of the way, making the journey agonizingly longer than it needed to be, and yet only a margin safer. In an attempt to be ready for any attack from the IWA troops, every possible path had at least one shinobi stationed for security. The silver-haired man had a hard time sneaking past his comrades without feeling a heavy guilt at the thought of abandoning his post and duty to everyone village, just for his best friend. It seemed no matter what choice he chose, there was no way around feeling guilty. The two of them were barely half the way to Kusa when Kabushi suddenly flung himself behind a pile of fallen trees. Naoe followed suit, even though he was still clueless of what had startled his sensei. What? The blonde asked softly. The Hitaki blinked before jumping up. Nothing. He headed towards the trees again, an intense look of concentration on his face. It wasn't much later when the blonde spoke up once again, noticing his teacher's odd behaviors. What? Naoe insisted, crouching low on a branch as he saw his teacher turn his head back in an increasing frequency. Kabushi's single gray-blue eye flickered paranoid, searching for things he couldn't see. Nothing, Kabushi finally said once more, after a moment. But he knew he couldn't just rely on his eyes. He could see nothing, but Naoe, head back, the man ordered suddenly. I'm not leaving you alone! Naoe cried incredulously. I can help. We've been over this. We're almost there. You shouldn't. If I get caught, Kabushi began. But saying this would have no effect on the blonde, Kabushi knew. The boy would do anything for his friends, and that's what made Naruto Naruto, no matter how frustrating it was at this very moment. This has nothing to do with you. Say you didn't even notice I was gone, the silver-haired time traveler tried once again. Make me, Naoe said petulantly, as Kabushi expected. He didn't want Naoe to get into trouble. He couldn't drag him into this. Not when Naruto looked so happy with his father. He couldn't take something like that away from him. Not when Naruto finally got to spend time with his family. His actual blood-related family for once. In a last attempt, Kabushi rounded up on his student, looming into his face in an imposing manner. I am ordering you as your jounin leader to return to your post. I can forbid you from participating in any more missions. Naruto hesitated for a mere second before a fierce glare narrowed on his face. You can't make me. You're not even a jounin anymore, the blonde retorted with a huff. Besides, when we get back to the future, you'll probably be thanking me when you spend the day with Obito instead of moping in front of the memorial stone. It was very hard to argue with that logic. Kabushi grudgingly admired his student's unshakable resolution, despite himself. Let's keep going then, the man sighed, giving in. With that, the two time travelers continued their way, slower, more cautious, but never doubting their decision. They would save Obito, or not. When the Anbu with the glistening ceramic hawk mask landed in front of the two time travelers, Kabushi knew why the seemingly empty terrain behind them had made him so paranoid. He'd sensed the Anbu, but Hawk had hidden himself well enough that Kabushi hadn't realized exactly what he had sensed. Hawk lowered himself into an offensive stance, ready to spring into action the moment he deemed the two before him to be a threat. You have disobeyed direct orders from the Hokage, the Anbu stated in military stiffness. Explain yourselves? Kakashi tried to explain the situation as vaguely as he could, but it was impossible without explaining exactly how he knew this information. We don't have time for this, Naruto snapped. Don't, Kabushi warned the teen beside him, whose fingers were already placed in his favorite hand seal. Naruto sent him a pleading look at his teacher's words, because they were so goddamn close. Kabushi shook his head reluctantly, casting his eyes to the ground. Don't, he repeated in a voice lower than a whisper, don't fight. Half of him wanted Naruto to resist his order and charge stubbornly on like he always did. The other half knew just how much of their plan of changing Konoha's future depended on the village's trust for them. They could not go against Konoha's Anbu military force. Not if they wanted to stay in Konoha. Come with us, the Anbu said, voice dry and uncaring. A subtle hint of threat could be heard under it. Understood, Kabushi answered. What about Naruto? Started in a soft, frantic whisper. With a heavy heart, the silver-haired man shook his head once more. Come along, he said. His lone gray-blue eyes stared longingly into hidden grass even as he dragged Naruto with him. Follow the Anbu. They walked back towards the village together, feeling the hostile chakra of the Anbu, now accompanied by 2 others, surrounding their every step. Naruto dragged his feet the whole way, trying to prolong the journey back and away from Obito's location even as the military forces around them barked out orders to quicken up. Kabushi held his face tight, trying to let nothing show on his face, but it was so hard because they'd been so close, so very close. Halt, the Anbu, Hawk snapped suddenly. The 5-man group stopped before the village gates. Just as suddenly, with only a quick nod at the other 2 Anbu behind the 2 time travelers, Hawk disappeared with a leap. Where's he going? Naruto asked, looking around. The Anbu, as Anbu should, stood silently around the 2, ignoring the question entirely. Kabushi took pity on his confused student. He's reporting to the Hokage, the masked man answered softly, remembering protocol when he'd still been in Anbu in his youth. He stared up into the sky, letting his past, and now the future once more, play across his mind, as his heart sunk lower. It wouldn't be long before little Kakashi learned these same protocols, with his heart closed and hurting, and a lying Joker mask on his frozen little face. It only took a few minutes before Hawk came back. The Anbu tilted his head. Follow me. For a while, the whole group walked in a depressed silence before Naruto broke it once he noticed where the Anbu was leading them. Aren't we going back to our spot? Naruto asked confused when the Anbu directed them towards another route. Kakashi knew the Anbu were afraid that they may have planted equipment there to spy or harm the Konoha troops, and they didn't want them to retrieve them back. Not that there would be any, no matter how hard they check. But the masked man knew better than to say it out loud. Hokage's orders, Hawk said plainly, never slowing a step, continuing his way to their new assigned position. They weren't as far this time. In fact, their new location was right by the border of fire country and hidden grass, as if teasing them, tempting them to forget orders and attempt to leave once more. Kabushi bit into his lower lip, resisting his urge and his knowledge that it was just right there. But Kabushi knew better than to disobey orders twice. Heck, even Naruto knew better than that. Get to work, Hawk said coolly. The Anbu gave them both a rigid glare before bringing his hands together and disappearing from sight. Of course, neither Naruto nor Kakashi were foolish enough to think they were being left alone. Not after their last stunt. Sensei Naruto started softly, keeping his voice low, but there was nothing else he could say. It was not going to be alright, and Kabushi knew it too. The silver-haired man had seen what was going to happen, would happen, and no amount of hope could change that. Kabushi shook his head weakly, working a placating smile on his face. It's fine, Naruto, he whispered, but Kabushi shook his head again. No. I knew it would happen again. At least now, I can say I truly tried. Instead of just standing in fear and shock, Kakashi knew his voice was cracking, and his eye was glistening in unshed tears, but the man forced himself to stand up tall. Thanks for persuading me to try. I'm sorry for being an idiot. If only I had a better plan, Naruto said, looking as bad as Kabushi felt. Naruto's heart touched Kabushi. The boy had been willing to risk his happy life with his father to disobey the Hokage with him. And now he was apologizing for persuading Kabushi for doing something he knew Kabushi would have regretted for the rest of his life if he hadn't. The silver-haired man ran his gloved hand over the boy's blonde hair. No, it's fine, he murmured softly, and if everything manages to stay the same no matter how hard we try to fix it, I'll at least be happy knowing I get to have you as one of my precious students, Kabushi said lovingly. That was one thing Kakashi could look forward to. For 2 days the two fought diligently by the fire country hidden grass border. Putting his whole heart to keeping back the enemy Nin was all Kabushi could do to keep his mind off other, more painful, matters. The silver-haired man could feel Naruto's worried gaze as he pushed himself to the limit every hour. He could feel the Anbu's suspicious gaze as they fought long and hard for the village without a single word, without a single acknowledgement of what they had been caught doing days before. That was fine with Kabushi. It was fine. In fact, everything was fine. It had to be fine. So it was fine. Yes, it was. Kabushi knew what was going to happen. He'd known and lived with it for almost 30 years. He'd managed to step in front of Obito's grave without breaking down for years now. But seeing the boy alive and happy for the past few months brought all his progress backwards. He couldn't do it. He didn't want the evidence that Obito would be gone again. His heart, his soul, wouldn't be able to handle it. Naruto had dragged him to the village gates, having heard word that Team Minato was coming back today. They themselves only arrived back to the village a little earlier than the team did. Kabushi had followed, thinking he could deal with it. And if nothing, he could help save little Kakashi from his pain, but he couldn't do it. Every time he looked up, All he saw were flashes of falling rocks and blurred scenery, as he was being pushed aside. Then there was nothing but the void of darkness, and in the center of it all, a beetle, and nothing more. All there was Abshio with his crushed goggles, half buried under the rocks. Abito with his eyes glistening in pain, but also happiness at seeing Kakashi safe. Abito moving his mouth to cheer them up, when all Kakashi wanted was for him to be able to keep talking forever. Abito giving him his most precious gift, when all he could do was sit there, unable to even tell the boy how much he owed him, how much he wished he could take back everything he said about him. How could he help his child self when he couldn't even face the fact himself? Naruto, beside Kabushi, could feel his sensei suddenly stiffen beside him. The boy narrowed his eyes, squinting, seeing what caught the older man's attention. In front of them, figures came closer, heading towards the village gates where they stood. The setting sun in the background behind the figures forced a bright glare into his eyes. All he could see were dark silhouettes moving closer and closer, but silhouettes were all the two needed in order to identify the incoming group. 1, 2, 3, Kabushi counted in his head. His breath caught the same time Naruto did, both realizing the same point at the same time. No fourth member. Pale hands trembled as he stared at the returning team. No. Kabushi's fingers clenched, digging nails into his palm, reminding him that yes, this was reality, and no, there was no escaping it. He'd known this was going to happen. He'd known before it happened. But why did it still have to hurt so much? Why did he have to count like there might have been a fourth dragging his feet along with his team? Why was he still clinging on to that small, impossible hope that Obito couldn't be dead? Two short figures walked slowly, limping every step. A taller figure walked beside them. Kabushi stared hard, unable to break his gaze from them. His heart leaped suddenly as Kabushi made out a final figure. It couldn't be Obito? Kabushi leaned forwards, eye widening, pleading, but the figure, he wasn't moving on his own. The limp outline of the fourth figure was slung across Minato's back as the blonde carried him back to the village. Kabushi grabbed his own cold hands, trying not to let his tremors show. And he will never move ever again, Kabushi's mind supplied him, even as the man tried not to think about it. Obito, he'd failed him. Again, the Canopy Bridge mission. Little Kakashi was in a decidedly better mood when he made it to the training area that day. His mood was due to the quick healing of the bruises he received the day before from the Jounin exams, of course. His uncle had said some really aggravating things last night, and the older Hataki's voice had haunted his sleep all night long no matter how hard Kakashi tried to tune it out. Honestly, he was better off ignoring whatever came out of his uncle's mouth. Kakashi stood calmly by the training grounds, forcefully shoving Kabushi's voice to the corner of his mind as he deliberately recited his pack's contents in an attempt to clear his mind. And to wait for the late Uchiha, of course. Uchiha Obito grow up? As if. The boy couldn't even wake up on time. Kakashi froze, realizing he was dwelling on his uncle's words once more. With a hiss, the boy shook his head, casing his mind to other matters. He really didn't want to think about the things his uncle preached at him. But why was it so hard not to? A bush to Kakashi's right shook violently at that moment, a telltale sign that Obito was here. Sparing a quick glance at Minato-sensei who was sitting on a rock in the middle of the training area, Kakashi let out a small huff, crossing his arms and waiting for the dead last to emerge. Did I make it? A breathless voice called out, crashing to the ground just in front of Kakashi, just as the masked teen had calculated. Kakashi stared down on Obito, face fixed into a scorn. You're late, he stated coolly. Yeah, the Uchiha began hesitantly. Well, on the way, I had to show the way to an old woman carrying luggage, and I hear enough of that from Kabushi to know that's a lie. Yeah, well, there was something in my eye too, Obshio continued weakly. Kakashi glared down on the Uchiha as Minato's calming voice called over to them. Hey now you two, don't be like that. I'm sure Obito helped an old lady, he assured. I warned Kabushi not to be late to his mission today regardless of old ladies, and Obito was probably just helping the dear lady Kabushi usually does. Yeah. Obshio agreed readily. Kakashi frowned. Push over, he muttered at Minato before giving the Uchiha another glare. Ninjas who don't follow the rules and regulations are called trash, Kakashi started, the beginnings of his usual rants. Behind him, Kakashi could hear his sensei chuckling nervously like he wanted to contradict him. But the Hatake knew he wouldn't. Because he was right. After all, this was exactly what happened to his own father, and how could anyone deny what happened in front of his own two eyes? Shut up. Obito grumbled, it's always about the rules with you. What about kindness? This was the idiot his uncle thought he liked? This idiot who was a failure of a ninja who couldn't even tell he was giving them fine advice. Hey, stop it. You're both in the same team, right? Rin interrupted, holding her hands out pleadingly. She looked worriedly between the two boys as Kakashi finally let out a breath. Fine. Today's an important day anyways. Yes, Rin grinned. Obito blinked. What? Important? Why? The utter confusion the boy expressed gave Kakashi's chest an angry stab. How could Obito forget? Today is Kakashi's first day as a jounin, like myself. Minato replied, oblivious to the sudden clenching in Kakashi's chest. And also the first mission he's going to lead. I told you about it, Obshio, Rin said, to give Kakashi a present. Oh, the Uchiha glared towards the side. I wasn't listening, he muttered. This wasn't supposed to affect him. This wasn't supposed to annoy him. This wasn't supposed to make his chest hurt. So why did the Uchiha's words sting so much? TSH, it's not like I want anything from you anyways, Kakashi said out loud instead, pushing his hate into every word. The blonde Jounin interrupted the two before another argument could take place. Here you go, Kakashi, Minato said, holding out a three-pronged kunai. It's a special kunai, he finished with a wink. And this is from me. Rin cried enthusiastically, presenting him with his own medical pouch. Kakashi thanked them both, before sneaking a glance at the staring raven-haired boy beside him. He held out his hand. What? Obito snapped. I'm not giving you anything. Oh? Then how about you be useful and carry my stuff? Kakashi replied dryly, almost unable to keep the bitter tone out of his voice. Don't you look down on me. Obito snarled suddenly, jumping into an offensive stance. I'm Uchiha Obito from the great Uchiha clan. I will surpass you and defeat you, the goggled boy declared, glaring down Kakashi. Boys, Minato chided, and despite the softness, there was a hint of a command in it. The blonde lead them under a shaded tree. Can I explain the mission now? We're almost at the country border. Kakashi nodded, focusing on the map his sensei laid out before them. Beside him, his teammates listened just as intently, but unlike his teammates, Kakashi's thoughts were elsewhere, unable to free his mind from the web his uncle's story threw over him the night before. All that was running through his mind was Kabushi's grand speech. But be friends with the Uchiha? Kakashi couldn't care less for the dead last, and it was obvious Obito didn't like him either. So why should he be the compassionate one around someone who hated him just as much? And what did his uncle know about them anyways? Kakashi stared at his own hand, wondering why he'd held it out expectantly to the Uchiha. Obito already said he forgot about his promotion, so it was obvious the boy wouldn't have gotten anything for him. Yet he'd held out his hand regardless. Was he honestly hoping the Uchiha was only just kidding? Was he honestly hoping for a present from the dead last? Was he hoping that the Uchiha, the kind Uchiha who was nice to everyone, show him same kindness even when he, Kakashi with his icy frozen heart, didn't deserve it? Team Kakashi, your mission is to sneak behind the enemy and destroy the bridge so they cannot receive their supplies? Minato's sharp voice suddenly cut through. Yes sir, Kakashi replied with the rest of his team without a second thought. The blonde nodded, ignorant to the fact Kakashi hadn't listened to a thing. Good. I will be in the front lines diverting their attention away from your group, the man said, likely to take pressure off Kakashi's first ever experience. Kakashi didn't need Minato to underestimate him like that. Let's go to the border. The mission starts now. While Konoha had always been a lush village filled with trees, hidden grass could not be rivaled. As the team trekked further and further past their country border, the trees grew larger, the grass greener, and even the mushrooms seemed oversized. Konoha had nothing on hidden grass. Perhaps it was because Kakashi was trying hard to concentrate on everything around him other than his own mind, that he noticed the enemy means surrounding them right away. It was also the reason why he'd accidentally stopped so unnaturally, alerting the enemy he noticed them, instead of discreetly informing his teammates. There's 20 of them. Maybe more, Minato informed the group as soon as they were hiding safely behind a large root. Let me handle it, Kakashi replied immediately, wanting to make up for the mistake he'd already made. It's a great chance to try out my new jutsu. Without waiting for an answer, the silver-haired boy clutched his right hand, allowing crackling lightning chakra to build up in his hands. Don't, Minato said softly, holding his hand in front of the masked boy, stalling him. From the corner of his eyes, Kakashi could see the concern on his sensei's face, but he wouldn't have it. I'm the commander this time, and I can take them out in a second. Just watch me, Kakashi stated firmly. Maybe, yes, just maybe, he was doing this mainly for himself and not the team, but the result was still going to be the same. He had to prove he was strong. He had to prove he wasn't a child, no matter his age, and no matter what Kabushi said. He'd stopped being a child long ago. He was independent, and he was strong. He didn't need the help of anyone but himself. Chidori, Kakashi hissed out, plunging into the woods where the enemy ninjas hid themselves. Metal kunai clanged against one another as Minato, behind him, shot down the weapons aimed towards him. Kakashi focused on where kunai originated from, mentally marking down each and every location of the enemy. Swiftly, the enemy fell, one by one, as the chirping thousand birds of his Chidori echoed through the forest. One more, Kakashi thought determinedly to himself as he rushed forwards once more. The world around him was blurry from the speed he was moving at. It was only too late Kakashi noticed the man had already unsheathed his sword and branded it towards his hurtling body. Kakashi panicked internally, but could only brace himself for pain. There was no longer enough time to stop. Oof, Kakashi breathed out as he was deposited on the grass from the strong grasp of his sensei. In another blink, their sensei was gone again in a yellow flash, leaving Kakashi with his other two teammates in their hiding spot. Your arm! Rin exclaimed suddenly. It was only then Kakashi realized he had been hurt. His arm bled profusely from the deep cut the enemy gave him. Let's head back to camp. Your wound needs to heal, Minato said, suddenly back with the group once more. A glance at the bloody kunai in his sensei's hand told Kakashi all he needed to know about where the man disappeared off to a second ago. I'm fine, Kakashi bit out, suddenly ashamed of his own rushed actions. He was Jounin, and he still needed to be saved by his teacher like a lowly genin. What do you mean, fine? You think everything is about you, rushing off and disobeying sensei's order. What kind of commander are you? Obito yelled at him. The silver-haired boy shot him a glare. I don't need to listen to anything you say, Kakashi snapped back at the other. What were you doing the whole time? Cowering and crying like a scared baby at the sight of them. Boys! Stop it! Minato barked, voice holding a stricter tone than any of the three heard before. The blonde's eyes narrowed slightly, fixing a stare at each of them. I've said it before, the man stated severely, and I'll continue saying it. The most important thing to a shinobi is teamwork. Sometimes we have to adapt to the situation. The rules and regulations are not everything. Kakashi lowered his gaze, feeling the others do so as well. And Kakashi, Minato began again, voice softer this time, but never losing that metallic touch, don't use that jutsu anymore. It's fast and has a powerful destructive power, but your movements are so fast you can't see your opponent's counter until it's too late. It's an incomplete jutsu. Kakashi kept quiet, clenching his fist, but he nodded all the same. Good, Minato replied. Let's head back to camp now. Kakashi nodded stiffly as he followed after his sensei. Beside him, Rin gave him a reassuring smile. Don't worry, Kakashi, I'll bandage it right up for you, and you'll be as good as new. The day after, Minato and Team Kakashi split up, going at their individual missions. Team Kakashi's mission was going smoothly in Kakashi's opinion, until Rin suddenly disappeared. Obito immediately rushed after the IWA shinobi retreating with Rin, when Kakashi stopped him with a shout. The Uchiha turned back, eyes aflame. What are you talking about? We have to go after them. She won't be killed right away, Kakashi pointed out logically, voice mechanically bland, his emotional state the exact polar opposite to the raven-haired Chunin's. The enemy will likely interrogate her for our aims before holding her prisoner. Rin's a medic nin, and as long as she looks after the enemy's casualties, she'll be treated well. We have to finish our mission before the enemy finds out. Kakashi watched as Obito grinded his teeth in frustration. What about Rin's safety? The boy exploded out. Is that less important than our mission? We signed up to do this once we entered the shinobi force. There will always be danger and sacrifices. Obito's fists trembled by his sides. After all Rin has done for us, patching us up whenever we're hurt, always making sure we're okay, you're just leaving her like that. I'm going to rescue Rin. I don't care what you say, I am your commander, the Jounin retorted back in a snarl. I was given this role because I am fit to make proper decision. You are letting your emotions run free. There was only a slight pause before Kakashi continued on. Emotions are unnecessary things. Shinobi are tools, and we finished the mission no matter what. Kakashi tried not to think too deeply about it when Obito's ebony eyes widened into a disbelieving, pitying look. Do you really believe that? The boy asked tentatively. Kakashi's heart seemed to thud harder at the words, as his mind threw up images and conversations he'd rather not dwell on ever again. Yes. He hissed out before it got out of hand. Of course I do. That is the way of a ninja. Don't be so naive. What happens to those who don't follow the rules? I believe the White Fan was a hero, Obito murmured softly, interrupting Kakashi. His tone was quiet, but the sheer strength he conveyed in those words stopped Kakashi's speech in its tracks. Obito's eyes suddenly snapped upwards, meeting Kakashi's blue-gray eyes in a fierce glare. You say those who don't follow the rules are trash, he spat out, but those who abandon their friends are worse than trash. The boy abruptly turned away, having said all he needed to say, and furiously ran towards the enemy's hideout where Rin was being held hostage, without another look back. The Chunin's words echoed in the wind as Kakashi grinded his teeth, hands shaking in tightly clenched fists. How dare he? What did he know? The silver-haired boy turned sharply on his heels, determinedly heading away from Obito. That stupid idiot, talking about things he didn't know. Stupidly ignoring the mission, disobeying direct orders. Damn it, Kakashi hissed out to himself as his strides gradually slowed down to a stop. He laid a gloved hand on his stomach, trying to force up his anger at Obito, anything to get rid of that uneasy feeling inside. Stupid dead last. After all Rin has done for us, patching us up whenever we're hurt? Always making sure we're okay. Obshio, don't worry Kakashi, I'll bandage it right up for you, and you'll be as good as new. Rin, Kakashi pressed his hand harder against his stomach. The most important thing to a shinobi is teamwork. Sometimes we have to adapt to the situation. The rules and regulations are not everything. Minato-sensei. He was a coward, hiding behind the word of rules. He was afraid to think for himself, and simply did what he was told without question. Why are you shoving away your emotions when you feel you can't deal with them? Why do you think there are people around you for? Kabushi, do you really believe that? I believe the White Fan was a hero.